I'll never forget the morning I woke up unable to move my legs. At 28, I'd been having strange symptoms for months, but when I called my mother from my apartment floor, her response chilled me. "Stop being so dramatic, Sherry. You're just looking for attention again." The numbness spreading through my body terrified me, but not as much as knowing my own parents wouldn't believe their daughter was dying. If only they knew what the blood tests would soon reveal. 6 months before that terrifying morning, I'd been standing in the conference room at Morrison Marketing Associates, ready to present our quarterly campaign to our biggest client. My PowerPoint was polished, my talking points memorized, and my confidence high. Then without warning, my right arm went completely limp. The laser pointer clattered onto the mahogany table as my fingers refused to grip. My colleague, Marcus, smoothly took over while I excused myself, claiming I needed water. In the bathroom, I watched my trembling reflection flexing my fingers as sensation slowly returned. This wasn't the first time something strange had happened to my body, but it was the first time it happened publicly. That Sunday, I mentioned it casually over pot roast at my parents' house. The dining room hadn't changed since my childhood, with its floral wallpaper and china cabinet displaying grandmother's collection. My mother, Patricia, paused mid-chew, her fork suspended in air. "You dropped a pointer and now you think something's wrong with you." She set down her fork with deliberate precision. "Honestly, Sherry, this is getting ridiculous." My father, Robert, didn't look up from his newspaper. The business section rustled as he turned the page, his silence as familiar as the ticking grandfather clock in the hallway. "Mom, I'm not saying anything seriously wrong. I just thought it was odd that my whole arm went numb for no reason." I pushed green beans around my plate, appetite fading. "You know what's odd?" My mother's voice sharpened like the carving knife she wielded at holidays. A grown woman who graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern still acting like she did when she was 12, inventing ailments for sympathy. The word stung worse than any physical symptom. When I was 12, I'd had severe stomach pains that turned out to be anxiety from being bullied at school. My mother had never let me forget how I'd wasted everyone's time with my dramatics. "Patricia," my father murmured without looking up. "Don't Patricia me, Robert. Someone needs to tell her the truth. First it was headaches in college, then that whole exhaustion phase after graduation. Now her arm falls asleep once and she wants us to panic." She turned back to me, hazel eyes hard behind her reading glasses. "You have a good job, your own apartment, decent health insurance. What more attention could you possibly need?" I wanted to mention the other symptoms I'd been documenting in my journal for weeks. The mornings when my vision blurred for no reason. The bone-deep exhaustion that 10 hours of sleep couldn't cure. The way words sometimes scrambled in my mind before I could speak them. But her expression stopped me cold. "I'm just keeping track of things in case they get worse," I said, quietly. "Keeping track." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You mean that notebook you carry everywhere, scribbling down every tiny sensation like you're conducting some kind of scientific experiment on yourself?" My face burned. I hadn't realized she'd noticed my journal. The rest of dinner passed in strained silence, broken only by requests to pass the salt and comments about the weather. As I helped clear the table, my younger sister Amy caught my eye. At 25, she still lived at home while finishing her master's degree in education. She gave me a look I couldn't quite read, something between sympathy and warning. While washing dishes, I overheard my parents in the living room. The TV volume was low and their voices carried through the thin wall. "She's doing it again," my mother said. "Mark my words, Robert. Next week she'll claim she needs to see some specialist." "Maybe she's just stressed at work," my father offered weakly. "Stressed, we raised her better than this. My mother never complained once, even when she was—" Patricia's voice trailed off, then hardened again. "The point is, we don't indulge weakness in this family." I scrubbed a plate harder than necessary, hot water scalding my hands. Amy appeared beside me with a dish towel. "You okay?" she whispered. "Fine," I lied, handing her the plate. 2 weeks later, I learned just how far my parents' dismissal had spread. At my cousin Rachel's birthday party, I overheard my Aunt Martha talking to other relatives in the kitchen. "Patricia says Sherry's at it again," Martha said, voice dripping with false concern. "Poor thing just can't seem to get enough attention. Remember when she claimed she had that gluten thing?" That was lactose intolerance. Someone corrected. "And didn't the doctor actually diagnose that?" "Oh, doctors will diagnose anything these days if you pay them enough," Martha waved dismissively. "Patricia's beside herself. Says Sherry's been carrying around some kind of medical diary, writing down every little ache and pain." I stood frozen in the hallway, birthday gift clutched in my hands. They were talking about me like I was some kind of fraud, a con artist faking illness for sympathy. The worst part was knowing my own mother had painted this picture of me. That night, Amy called me after I'd gotten home. "I need to tell you something," she said, voice unusually serious. "But you can't let Mom and Dad know I told you." "What is it?" "Last week after you left dinner, they kept talking about you. Mom was going on and on about how you've always been sensitive and attention-seeking. Dad just sat there agreeing with everything." She paused. "So I started recording them on my phone." My heart skipped. "Amy, why would you do that?" "Because it's not right, Sherry. The way they talk about you when you're not there, it's cruel. And I think you deserve to know what they really say. I'm sending you the audio file now." The recording was worse than I imagined. My mother's voice, usually so controlled in person, was venomous as she detailed my history of fake problems to my father. She mentioned incidents I barely remembered from childhood, building a narrative of a daughter who couldn't function without constant validation. My father's occasional agreements felt like betrayals of their own. But the worst part came at the end when my mother said, "If she thinks we're going to drop everything every time she invents a new symptom, she's got another think coming. I won't enable this behavior anymore. As far as I'm concerned, she's perfectly healthy until a real doctor proves otherwise. And maybe not even then." I listened to the recording 3 times each playback, carving deeper wounds. This wasn't just dismissal or frustration. This was complete rejection of my reality delivered with a cruelty I hadn't known my mother possessed. The symptoms, meanwhile, grew worse. But now I had a new fear alongside the physical deterioration, the knowledge that the 2 people who were supposed to care most wouldn't believe me even if I were dying. Over the next 2 months, my body began betraying me in ways I couldn't hide or explain away. The morning blurred vision became a regular occurrence, forcing me to wait sometimes 20 minutes before I could safely drive to work. I started setting my alarm earlier, building buffer time into my routine for when my eyes refused to focus properly. The fatigue was different from normal tiredness. It felt like someone had replaced my blood with concrete, making every movement require monumental effort. I'd sleep 10 hours and wake up more exhausted than when I went to bed. Coffee became my lifeline, though even 6 cups barely made a dent in the bone-deep weariness. But the memory lapses scared me most. During a team meeting, I completely forgot the name of a client I'd worked with for 2 years. The name simply vanished from my mind, leaving a blank space where knowledge should have been. I covered by referring to them as our retail partners, but Marcus noticed. "You okay?" he asked after the meeting. "That was weird, you forgetting Brennan Industries like that." "Just tired," I said, the excuse becoming automatic. I documented everything in my journal, creating detailed entries about each incident. Time, date, duration, severity, potential triggers. If I was going to convince anyone something was wrong, I needed evidence. Data. Proof that I wasn't imagining things. The decision to show my parents the journal came after a particularly bad week. I'd had to leave work early twice due to sudden vertigo, and my supervisor, Janet, had started making comments about my reliability issues. I needed support even if seeking it from my parents felt like walking into a lion's den. I chose a Sunday afternoon, arriving at their house with the journal tucked in my purse. They were in the living room, my father watching golf while my mother worked on a crossword puzzle. Everything about the scene was painfully normal. "Mom, Dad, I need to talk to you about something important." I began sitting on the edge of the ottoman. My mother sighed dramatically, setting down her pen. "What crisis is it this time, Sherry?" I pulled out the journal, its purple cover worn from daily handling. "I've been documenting my symptoms for 3 months. I think something's really wrong and I need your support to figure out what." "Documenting," my mother repeated flatly. I opened to a recent entry showing them my careful notations. "Look, on Tuesday I had vision problems for 37 minutes. Wednesday my left leg went numb during lunch. Thursday..." The journal was ripped from my hands so suddenly I gasped. My mother stood up, fury radiating from her thin frame as she marched to the kitchen. I followed, watching in horror as she held my journal over the trash can. "Mom, no. That's months of medical documentation. This," she said, waving the journal like evidence in a trial, "is exactly the problem. You're obsessed with finding something wrong with yourself. It's WebMD syndrome, Sherry. You read about diseases online and convince yourself you have them." "I haven't looked up anything online," I protested, reaching for the journal. "These are just my experiences written down as they happened." She dropped it in the trash with a decisive thud. "Then you won't need it anymore." I stood there staring at my journal among coffee grounds and eggshells, feeling something break inside me. This wasn't just dismissal anymore. This was active destruction of my reality. My father appeared in the doorway, golf tournament forgotten. "Patricia, maybe that was a bit what, Robert? Harsh." "Someone needs to be harsh. Our daughter is 28 years old and acting like a hypochondriac. What's next? Disability claims, attention-seeking posts on social media about her mysterious illness. I have never posted anything about this," I said through gritted teeth, fishing my journal out of the trash. Coffee stained the pages, but the ink hadn't run too badly. "I've been handling this privately, trying to understand what's happening to my body before involving anyone else." "What's happening," my father said slowly, "is that you're stressed. Your job is demanding you live alone. You don't have a relationship to ground you. Maybe what you need isn't medical attention, but psychological help." The suggestion might have been well-meaning from someone else, but from him, it felt like another dismissal. "You think I'm having a mental breakdown?" "I think," he said carefully, "that therapy might help you understand why you feel the need to create these situations." Create. I clutched my rescued journal, coffee dripping onto my mother's pristine floor. "You think I'm creating muscle weakness, making up vision problems, pretending to forget things?" "The mind is powerful," my mother interjected. "It can manifest all sorts of physical symptoms when someone is seeking attention or avoiding responsibility." "Avoiding what responsibility? I haven't missed a single deadline at work, despite feeling like I'm falling apart." "Yet," my mother said coldly, "give it time. Soon you'll be calling in sick, claiming you can't function, expecting everyone to cater to your needs." I left their house shaking with rage and hurt. In my car, I tried to clean the coffee stains from my journal pages, tears making the task harder. 3 months of careful documentation dismissed as attention-seeking fantasy, thrown in the trash like worthless delusions. That evening, Amy texted me, "Heard what happened. Mom's still ranting. Dad's agreeing with everything she says. I'm so sorry." I didn't respond. What was there to say? The next morning brought a new symptom. My hands trembled so badly I couldn't button my blouse. I stood in my bedroom, fingers fumbling uselessly with the small plastic buttons, until I gave up and chose a pullover sweater instead. The trembling subsided after an hour, but the fear lingered. At work, I threw myself into projects with desperate intensity, trying to prove my reliability even as my body continued its rebellion. I stayed late, volunteered for extra assignments, triple-checked everything I produced. If I could just maintain the appearance of competence, maybe I could buy time to figure out what was wrong. But bodies don't care about performance reviews or parental approval. During a Wednesday afternoon presentation, my left leg went completely numb. Not the pins and needles sensation of a limb falling asleep, but total absence of feeling from hip to toe. I gripped the conference table, maintaining my smile while discussing market projections, willing my leg to support my weight. Excellent insights on the demographic shift, our client said. Could you walk us through the social media strategy on screen 3? Walking was exactly what I couldn't do. I stayed planted in place, gesturing to Marcus to advance the slides while I narrated from my position. The numbness lasted 40-minute sensation returning in waves of painful tingles just as the meeting concluded. You were acting strange in there, Janet commented afterward. Why didn't you move from that spot? Just finding my groove, I said weakly. She frowned but said nothing more. I limped back to my desk, added the incident to my coffee-stained journal, and wondered how long I could maintain this charade. The answer came 2 weeks later when Amy called me breathless with excitement and anger. You're not going to believe what I recorded, she said. Mom and Dad had Uncle Dennis and Aunt Martha over for dinner last night. The things they said about you. I don't know if I want to hear it, I admitted, exhaustion weighing down every word. You need to, Amy insisted. They're poisoning the entire family against you. Listen to this. The recording was crystal clear. My mother's voice dominated the conversation, painting me as a manipulative attention seeker who'd been performing illness since childhood. She cited examples spanning decades, building a case that would convince any jury of my supposed deception. Remember when she was 16 and claimed she couldn't see the board at school? My mother said. We got her glasses she didn't need, wore them for a month before miraculously recovering her vision. I remembered that incident differently. The optometrist had said my vision was borderline, that glasses might help with eye strain. When they hadn't made much difference, I'd stopped wearing them. But in my mother's retelling, it became evidence of manipulation. And in college, my mother continued, the mysterious fatigue that only appeared during finals week. That fatigue had been diagnosed as mononucleosis by the campus health center. I'd been sick for months, struggling through classes with a documented illness. But facts didn't matter in my mother's narrative. Poor Patricia, Aunt Martha cooed sympathetically. It must be so hard having a daughter who refuses to grow up. The worst part, my mother said, voice dropping to a confidential whisper, is that she's starting to affect her career. Janet from her office called me last week concerned about Sherry's performance. I had to make excuses, claim she was going through a difficult time. My blood ran cold. Janet had called my mother about my work performance. The betrayal felt multi-layered, professional boundaries crossed and parental undermining combined. What did you tell her? Uncle Dennis asked. The truth, my mother replied, that Sherry has always had a tendency toward dramatics, but she usually grows out of these phases. I assured her it would pass. You're a saint for putting up with it, Martha said. In my day, children didn't dare act out like this. We've tried everything, my father's voice joined in, reasoning with her tough love, even suggesting therapy. Nothing works. She's determined to be the victim. The recording continued for another 10 minutes, each word, another nail in the coffin of family support. By the time it ended, I understood the full scope of my isolation. This wasn't just my parents dismissing my concerns. This was a coordinated campaign to discredit me to everyone I knew. I'm so sorry, Sherry, Amy whispered. I had no idea they were calling your boss. That's so messed up. It's okay. I lied, though nothing about this situation approached okay. Thank you for recording it. At least now I know where I stand. What are you going to do? I looked at my journal, coffee-stained and warped, but still intact. I'm going to keep documenting everything, and I'm going to find a doctor who believes me with or without family support. I believe you, Amy said quietly. For what it's worth, I've seen the trembling. I've noticed when you forget words. You're not making this up. It was the first time anyone had acknowledged what I was experiencing as real. I clutched the phone tighter, gratitude overwhelming me. Thank you, I managed through sudden tears. That means more than you know. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment's silence, processing the reality of my situation. My parents hadn't just dismissed my symptoms, they'd actively worked to discredit me professionally and socially. The support system I'd hoped to rely on had become another obstacle to overcome. But Amy's validation, small as it was, gave me strength. Someone saw my struggle. Someone believed me. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep fighting. I opened my journal to a fresh page, writing in careful letters across the top, "I am not crazy. I am not lying. Something is wrong with my body, and I will find answers." Underneath, I began a new entry. Day 93. Symptoms continue to escalate. Family support non-existent. Professional reputation potentially compromised. But I persist. I persist because this is real, whether anyone believes me or not. The trembling in my hands made my handwriting shaky, but I kept writing. Each word was a small act of defiance against those who would erase my experience. Each entry was proof that I existed, that my pain was real, that my body's rebellion deserved recognition. Tomorrow would bring new symptoms, new challenges, new dismissals. But tonight, in the yellow glow of my desk lamp, I documented my truth. It was all I could do, and somehow it was enough. The grocery store incident happened on a Tuesday afternoon in October. I'd taken a half day from work telling Janet I had a dental appointment, rather than admitting I could barely see straight from the crushing headache that had started at dawn. The fluorescent lights of Whole Foods made everything worse, but I needed supplies. I was reaching for a jar of pasta sauce when it happened. One moment I was standing, the next, my legs simply weren't there. Not numb this time, but completely unresponsive, as if someone had severed the connection between my brain and lower body. The jar shattered on the floor as I collapsed, red sauce exploding across the white tiles like a crime scene. "Oh my God," a woman's voice high and panicked. "Someone call 911. I tried to speak to say I was fine, just needed a moment, but my tongue felt thick and clumsy. People gathered around me, their faces blurring together like a watercolor painting left in rain. "Don't move her," a man commanded. "She might have injured her spine." I hadn't injured anything. My body had simply decided to stop working here in the pasta aisle, surrounded by strangers and broken glass. The embarrassment burned hotter than the physical symptoms. "Can you hear me?" A store employee knelt beside me, her name tag reading, "Amanda, here to help." "What's your name?" "Sherry," I managed, though it came out slurred. I'm okay. Just need—" "You're not okay," Amanda said firmly. "The ambulance is on its way." "No," I protested weakly. The last thing I needed was an emergency room bill and my parents finding out. "Please, I can't—" But my protests dissolved as another wave of disconnection washed over me. My arms joined my legs in their strike, leaving me helpless on the cold floor. Someone had put their jacket under my head, and Amanda held my hand, her grip the only thing anchoring me to reality. The EMTs arrived in a blur of navy uniforms and efficient movements. They asked questions I struggled to answer, shone lights in my eyes, took vital signs with practiced ease. "Has this happened before?" The older EMT Rodriguez, according to his badge, spoke gently. Not like this," I admitted. "Numbness, weakness, but never." "We're going to take you to St. Mary's for evaluation," he said. "Is there someone we should call?" I gave them my parents' number, already dreading their reaction. The ER was controlled chaos, beeping machines and hurried footsteps, and the antiseptic smell that made my stomach turn. They ran tests, drawing what felt like gallons of blood, sending me through the CT scanner, attaching electrodes to measure nerve function. "The good news," Dr. Chen said 2 hours later, "is that your CT is clear, no stroke, no obvious brain abnormalities." Then what happened to me? She frowned at her tablet. "Your initial blood work shows some inflammation markers, but nothing definitive. Sometimes the body reacts to stress in dramatic ways. Have you been under pressure lately?" Before I could answer, my parents burst through the curtain. My mother's face was a mask of fury, poorly disguised as concern. "What did you do now?" were her first words. Not, "Are you okay?" or "We were so worried," but an accusation wrapped in exasperation. Mrs. Peterson, Dr. Chen, intervened smoothly. "Your daughter experienced a significant neurological event. She lost function in her lower extremities for approximately 40 minutes. She fainted in a grocery store," my mother corrected. "Probably forgot to eat lunch and made a scene." "I didn't faint," I said, finding my voice. "My legs stopped working, completely. Then my arms." "Drama," my mother muttered, but quiet enough that Dr. Chen might not have heard. My father stood behind her, studying the monitor, displaying my vitals, as if they might reveal some truth he could accept. "What do the tests show?" "So far, inconclusive," Dr. Chen admitted. "But given the symptoms described and witnessed by multiple people, I'd like to refer Sherry to a neurologist for follow-up. This could be the beginning of something that needs monitoring." "Of course it is," my mother said. "There's always a follow-up, always another specialist, always more attention needed." "Mom," I pleaded, exhaustion making my voice crack. "People saw me collapse. The store has security footage. I'm not making this up." "Nobody said you're making it up," my father said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But these things, they can be psychosomatic, the mind playing tricks." Dr. Chen's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Peterson, while psychological factors can manifest physically, what your daughter experienced today suggests a neurological component that warrants investigation." "At what cost?" my mother demanded. "Do you know what emergency room visits charge these days? What specialists bill all for what will probably turn out to be anxiety or attention-seeking behavior?" "I'll pay for it myself," I said quietly. "I'm not asking you for money." "With what your marketing salary?" "After you've already been taking half days and leaving early." My mother's inside knowledge of my work schedule confirmed my suspicions that Janet had been reporting to her. "How long before you lose that job and come running to us?" Patricia, Dr. Chen said, her professional composure cracking slightly. "Your daughter needs support right now, not—" "Don't tell me what my daughter needs," my mother snapped. "I've been dealing with her episodes for 28 years. This is a pattern, doctor. Create a crisis, seek attention, disrupt everyone's lives, then miraculously recover when she's gotten enough sympathy." The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Chen looked between us, clearly reassessing the situation. I could see her weighing professional obligations against family dynamics she couldn't fully understand. "Sherry," she said finally, "you're an adult. You don't need anyone's permission to seek follow-up care. I'm going to discharge you with a referral to Dr. Marcus Harrison at the Neurology Associates Clinic. He's excellent." She handed me the paperwork, then did something unexpected. While my parents were distracted by discharge forms, she leaned close and pressed something into my hand, a business card different from the referral. "Call him," she whispered. "Tell him Eleanor Chen sent you. He'll make sure you're seen quickly." I palmed the card, nodding gratefully. The ride home was a silent war. My father drove while my mother sat rigid in the passenger seat. I huddled in the back legs, still shaky but functional, trying to process what had happened. Not just the collapse, but my parents' public dismissal of my medical crisis. "You'll pay us back for the ER copay," my mother said as we pulled up to my apartment building, "since you insisted on making this spectacle." "I didn't insist on anything," I said. "My body stopped working in a public place. The store called the ambulance." "Your body stopped working," she repeated mockingly. "Always so dramatic. Do you know how embarrassing it was getting that call at Bridge Club, having to leave in the middle of a hand because our adult daughter fainted in Whole Foods? I could have been dying," I said quietly. "Would that have been less embarrassing for you?" My father's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Don't be melodramatic, Sherry. You're clearly not dying. How would you know you haven't asked a single question about how I feel, what I've been experiencing, why this happened? You just show up and apologize for my existence." "We show up," my mother said, turning to face me with cold eyes, "because despite your behavior, we're your parents. But that doesn't mean we have to enable your hypochondria. Get out. And next time you want to create a scene, call an Uber instead of an ambulance. I climbed out on unsteady legs, clutching my discharge papers and the secret business card. They drove away before I reached the building entrance, leaving me to navigate the stairs alone, on legs I didn't quite trust. Inside my apartment, I collapsed on the couch and finally looked at Dr. Chen's card. It wasn't a business card at all, but a small note written on prescription pad paper. Dr. Harrison, neurologist who listens. Tell him about the pattern. I've seen this before. Those last 4 words undid me. Someone had seen this before. Someone recognized what was happening to me as real as a pattern, not as attention-seeking behavior or psychological manipulation. I called Dr. Harrison's office the next morning, mentioning Dr. Chen's name. The receptionist's tone immediately warmed. "Oh, if Eleanor sent you, we need to get you in quickly. Can you come Thursday at 2? That soon? I was used to specialist appointments taking weeks or months to schedule. Dr. Harrison keeps slots open for Eleanor's referrals. She has good instincts about urgent cases. Urgent cases, not hypochondria or drama or attention-seeking, an urgent case. I took Thursday afternoon off, telling Janet I had a follow-up from my ER visit. Her expression suggested she'd already heard a version of events from my mother, but she approved the time without comment. Dr. Harrison's office was nothing like the sterile hospital environment. Warm colors, soft lighting, and a waiting room that felt more like a living room than a medical facility. When he called me back personally, rather than sending a nurse, I knew this would be different. "Eleanor tells me you've been having progressive neurological symptoms that your family is dismissing," he said without preamble, settling into a chair across from me rather than behind his desk. "Tell me everything from the beginning. Take your time." For the first time in months, I told my whole story without interruption or dismissal. He listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but never suggesting I was exaggerating or seeking attention. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "First," he said, "I want you to know that I believe you. Your symptoms are real, they're concerning, and they deserve thorough investigation. The pattern you're describing, particularly the progression and the episodic nature, suggests several possibilities we need to explore." "You believe me?" I repeated, tears threatening. "Of course I believe you. You're describing classic signs of several potential neurological conditions. The fact that your family doesn't recognize them doesn't make them less real." He pulled out a pad and began writing. "We're going to run comprehensive tests. Blood work beyond what the ER did in MRI with contrast nerve conduction studies. We'll figure out what's happening." "My parents think I'm making it up for attention," I admitted. His expression darkened. "Unfortunately, I see this more often than you'd think, particularly with conditions that present subtly at first or primarily affect women. Family dismissal can be as damaging as the illness itself." He handed me the test orders. "Do you have support from anyone?" "My sister believes me. She's been documenting how my parents talk about me when I'm not around." "Good. You'll need support for what's ahead. These conditions, whatever we find, they're real. And having family deny your reality while you're fighting for your health, that's its own kind of trauma." I left his office feeling something I hadn't experienced in months: validation. Someone with medical expertise had listened to my symptoms and responded not with dismissal, but with action. The tests would be expensive, might strain my savings, but at least I was moving toward answers. That evening, Amy called. "Mom's telling everyone you made a scene at Whole Foods for attention. She's furious about the ER bill." I collapsed. Amy, completely lost function in my legs. It wasn't a scene, it was a medical emergency. "I know, I believe you, but she's spinning it hard, calling family members, building her narrative. Dad's backing her up as usual." "Let her," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "I'm done trying to convince them. I found a doctor who believes me and we're running real tests. Whatever this is, I'm going to get answers with or without their support." "Good for you," Amy said. "And Sherry, I'm proud of you for keeping going despite everything." After we hung up, I sat with my coffee-stained journal and wrote a new entry. Today, 2 medical professionals validated my experience. Dr. Chen saw something familiar in my symptoms. Dr. Harrison believes me without question. I am not crazy. I am not seeking attention. I am sick, and I am finally on the path to discovering why. The path ahead was uncertain, potentially expensive, definitely challenging. But for the first time since my symptoms began, I didn't feel alone in walking it. 2 doctors had seen me, really seen me, and that made all the difference. My legs steady for now carried me to bed, where I lay thinking about patterns and recognition and the power of being believed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight I had hope. Not for my parents' understanding that seemed impossible now, but for answers, for validation, for proof that my body's rebellion had meaning beyond my mother's cruel narratives. In the darkness, I whispered to myself, I am not crazy. I am not lying. I am sick. And soon everyone will know it. The morning I collapsed at work started like so many others, with me standing in my bathroom, gripping the sink as waves of dizziness threatened to knock me down. My reflection wavered in the mirror features, indistinct as my vision struggled to focus. 4 cups of coffee hadn't touched the bone-deep exhaustion, and I'd already taken twice the recommended dose of over-the-counter pain medication for the headache that felt like my skull might crack open. "You can do this," I whispered to my blurry reflection. "Just 8 hours, one day at a time." I dressed carefully, choosing a blazer with pockets to hide the tremor in my hands and flat shoes in case my legs betrayed me again. The drive to Morrison Marketing required all my concentration, and I white-knuckled the steering wheel, praying my body would cooperate until I reached the parking garage. The presentation was scheduled for 10:30. Richardson Retail, our biggest client, was expecting a comprehensive quarterly review and strategy proposal for their holiday campaign. I'd prepared for weeks, perfecting every slide, memorizing every talking point. This presentation could secure my position despite my recent reliability issues, proving I was still valuable to the team. By 9:45, I knew I was in trouble. The conference room lights seemed to pulse with my heartbeat, and sweat beaded on my forehead despite the air conditioning. My hands shook so badly, I could barely hold my laser pointer steady during the tech check. "You good?" Marcus asked, setting up the video conference link. "You look pale." "Just nervous," I lied, forcing a smile. "Big presentation." He squeezed my shoulder supportively. "You'll crush it. You always do." But as the Richardson team filed onto the screen and our local executives took their seats, my body began its betrayal in earnest. The tremor spread from my hands up my arms, and my legs felt like they were dissolving beneath me. I gripped the edge of the table, hoping it looked like confident posture rather than desperate support. "Good morning, everyone." I began, proud that my voice remained steady despite everything. "Today we'll be reviewing third-quarter performance and presenting our holiday strategy recommendations." I managed the introduction smoothly, clicking through the initial slides with minimal fumbling. But as I moved into the data analysis section, the room began to spin. Not a gentle sway, but a violent carnival ride rotation that made my stomach lurch. As you can see from these conversion metrics, I continued gesturing at a screen that now appeared to be melting. Our targeted campaigns exceeded projections by... The number wouldn't come. I stared at the slide I'd created, the one I'd reviewed 100 times, and the digits might as well have been hieroglyphics. My mind, usually sharp with figures, offered nothing but static. 15%. Marcus supplied smoothly, stepping closer. "Sherry, why don't you elaborate on the demographic breakdown while I advance the slides?" I nodded gratefully, but as I turned to face the conference room fully, my legs finally gave out. Not gradually this time, but all at once, like someone had hit a switch. I crumpled, catching myself on the table's edge for a moment before sliding to the floor, my blazer catching and tearing on a chair arm as I went down. The room erupted in chaos. Chairs scraped back, voices rose in alarm, and someone killed the video feed to spare our clients the scene. I lay on the carpet, fully conscious but unable to make my legs respond, watching my carefully constructed professional facade shatter as thoroughly as that pasta jar in Whole Foods. "Call an ambulance," Janet commanded, her usual composed demeanor cracking. "Marcus, get her some water. Everyone else out." "No ambulance," I managed, remembering the ER bill I was still paying off. "Please, I just need a minute." "Sherry, you just collapsed in the middle of a client presentation," Janet said, kneeling beside me. Her expression was unreadable, caught between concern and something else. Calculation, maybe. "This isn't something you walk off." My legs began to tingle sensation, returning in painful waves. With Marcus's help, I managed to sit up back against the wall, trying to salvage some dignity from the situation. The Richardson team was gone from the screen. The presentation abandoned my professional reputation in ruins. "I have a neurological condition," I said quietly. "I'm seeing a specialist, getting tests. This shouldn't have happened here. I'm so sorry." Janet studied me for a long moment. "How long has this been going on?" "Months, but I've been managing it, keeping up with my work." "Have you—" She pulled out her phone, scrolling through something. "Because I've been tracking your performance, Sherry. The missed deadlines you thought no one noticed. The projects you've quietly passed to Marcus. The afternoons you've left early or come in late." Each accusation hit like a physical blow. I'd thought I'd been so careful, so clever in hiding my struggles. But Janet had seen everything, compiled it all into data points that painted a picture of decline. "Then there's this," she continued, voice hardening. "Your mother called me last month, warned me about your attention-seeking behaviors and tendency toward dramatic episodes. I defended you, said you were one of my best employees. But now—" "My mother called you." The betrayal felt fresh, despite knowing about it from Amy's recording. Hearing it confirmed by my boss made it real in a different way. "She had no right. She's your emergency contact. She was concerned about your impact on the company." Janet stood, smoothing her skirt. "Take the rest of the day. Hell, take tomorrow too. But when you come back, we need to have a serious conversation about your future here." "Janet, please. I'm good at my job. This medical situation, it's temporary. Once we figure out what's wrong—" "That's just it, Sherry. Once we figure it out isn't a timeline I can work with. Richardson was watching that presentation. Do you know what it looks like when one of my senior marketing strategists collapses mid-pitch? Do you know what they're thinking about our company's stability right now?" I wanted to argue, to fight, to rage against the unfairness of being punished for illness. But sitting on the floor with carpet burns on my palms and my torn blazer exposing my vulnerability, I had no ammunition left. The room emptied until only Marcus remained. He helped me to my feet, supporting me as my legs relearned their function. "That was messed up," he said quietly. "The way Janet just turned on you." "She's protecting the company," I said, exhausted beyond measure. "I understand." "Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like discrimination against someone with a medical condition." He guided me to my desk, helping me gather my things. "You should document everything. The presentation, what Janet said, all of it." I almost laughed. "I've been documenting everything for months. No one believes the documentation of someone they've decided is attention-seeking." Marcus frowned. "Who told you that you're attention-seeking?" "My mother, my father, extended family. And apparently my mother's been spreading that narrative to my boss." I shoved my laptop into my bag with shaking hands. "It's funny. I spent so much energy trying to hide my symptoms, to maintain normalcy, to not seek attention. And I'm still labeled an attention seeker." "Your family sounds toxic," he said bluntly. "No wonder you've been struggling alone." "I have my sister," I said, "and a good doctor now. It's more than I had a month ago." Marcus drove me home, insisting I shouldn't be behind the wheel. During the ride, he shared something I hadn't expected. "My daughter has lupus," he said, eyes on the road. "Took 3 years to get diagnosed because her first symptoms were vague. Fatigue, joint pain, brain fog. Doctors kept telling my wife she was overreacting, that teenagers are just tired. Then Mia had a seizure during volleyball practice. That must have been terrifying." It was. But you know what was worse. The months of being dismissed, watching her suffer while people suggested she was lazy or seeking attention. Even some family members implied we were enabling her. He glanced at me. The pattern's always the same. Invisible illness gets denied until it becomes dramatically visible. What happened after the seizure? Finally got proper testing. Started treatment. She's in college now, managing well with medication. But those years of medical gaslighting did damage. She still struggles to trust her own body, still apologizes for symptoms like they're character flaws. We pulled up to my building. Before I got out, Marcus handed me a business card. My wife runs a support group for people with chronic illnesses and their families. Might be helpful, especially given your family's situation. I took the card gratefully. Marcus, thank you for everything. The presentation saved the ride this. Take care of yourself, he said seriously. And don't let them push you out without a fight. What happened today wasn't your fault. Inside my apartment, I collapsed on the couch and finally let myself cry. Not gentle tears, but body-shaking sobs that left me breathless. The presentation disaster replayed in my mind on loop, each viewing revealing new humiliations I'd missed in the moment. My professional reputation, carefully built over 6 years, had crumbled in minutes. My phone buzzed with texts. 3 from Amy asking if I was okay, having somehow already heard about the incident. 1 from my mother, surprisingly. Janet called. Apparently, you made quite the scene at work today. This is what I warned her about. You're determined to destroy everything you've built, aren't you? Dad and I are disappointed, but not surprised. I stared at the message, waiting to feel something. Anger, hurt, frustration. But there was only emptiness where my emotional response should have been. My mother had won in a way. Her narrative about my attention-seeking had become reality in everyone's eyes. The fact that I'd collapsed from actual neurological symptoms didn't matter. The story was set. Amy called while I was still staring at the phone. Sherry, I heard what happened. Are you okay? No, I said honestly. I collapsed during the most important presentation of the year. Janet basically told me my job's in jeopardy, and Mom's already spinning it as proof of her attention-seeking theory. That's such crap. You have actual medical symptoms. You're seeing a neurologist. This isn't some psychological game. Try explaining that to anyone who's already decided I'm a drama queen. I pulled the coffee-stained journal from my bag, flipping to a fresh page. I need to write this down while it's fresh. Marcus said to document everything. Good idea. And Sherry, maybe it's time to look into medical leave or disability protections. You can't keep pushing yourself like this. With what diagnosis, Dr. Harrison is still running tests. Without official documentation, I'm just an employee who can't handle her job. We talked for another hour, Amy offering support and practical suggestions while I took notes. She mentioned researching ADA protections and employee rights, showing a fierce protective streak I hadn't expected from my younger sister. After the call, I sat in the gathering dusk of my apartment considering my options. My body was failing in increasingly dramatic ways. My family had abandoned me. My job hung by a thread. But somehow, in the ruins of my carefully constructed life, I found unexpected clarity. I pulled out Dr. Harrison's card and the information about Marcus's wife's support group. Then I opened my laptop and began researching. Disability laws, medical leave policies, patient advocacy groups, invisible illness resources. If I was going to fight this battle, I needed better weapons than mere endurance. The tremor in my hands made typing difficult, but I persisted. Each bookmark saved felt like a small act of rebellion. Each resource discovered was ammunition against those who would dismiss my reality. By midnight, I'd created a comprehensive file, legal resources support groups, medical advocacy organizations, even lawyers who specialized in disability discrimination. I might be losing control of my body, but I could still control my response to that loss. Before bed, I made one final journal entry. Today I lost my professional facade but gained something more valuable: clarity about who stands with me and who stands against me. Marcus and his family understand. Amy fights for me. Dr. Harrison believes me. These allies matter more than a mother who undermines me or a boss who sees me as a liability. Tomorrow I begin fighting differently, not to hide my illness, but to demand recognition and accommodation. I am done apologizing for symptoms I didn't choose. My legs carried me to bed unsteady but functional. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, possibly including unemployment. But tonight, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months' hope. Not for cure or even diagnosis yet, but for the possibility of living truthfully with whatever my body was becoming. The tremor in my hands had spread to my core by the time sleep took me, but I didn't fight it. My body would do what it needed to do. My job was to survive it, document it, and demand better from a world that preferred my suffering stay invisible. Dr. Harrison's office felt different on my second visit. The warm colors and soft lighting remained unchanged, but I arrived bearing the weight of my workplace collapse and mounting evidence that something was seriously wrong. My hands shook as I filled out updated forms, noting new symptoms that had emerged in the 2 weeks since our first meeting. Sherry. Dr. Harrison greeted me personally again, his expression serious but kind. I've reviewed your test results. Let's talk in my office. The walk down the hallway felt endless, my legs still unreliable after their latest betrayal. He noticed my unsteady gait, offering his arm without comment, and I accepted gratefully. Small gestures of belief meant everything now. His office walls displayed diplomas and certifications, but also patient artwork and thank you cards. Signs of a doctor who saw people, not just symptoms. He gestured to a comfortable chair across from his desk, then surprised me by pulling his own chair around to sit beside me rather than maintaining the barrier of furniture between us. First, he said, opening my file, I want to show you something. He turned his computer monitor so I could see the images displayed. This is your MRI. The brain scans looked like abstract art to my untrained eye layers of gray and white in intricate patterns. But Dr. Harrison pointed to specific areas with practiced ease. See these spots here and here. His finger traced small white areas scattered through the images. These are lesions, areas where the myelin sheath around your nerve fibers has been damaged. Lesions. I repeated the word, feeling foreign on my tongue. That sounds concerning, yes, but also validating. Sherry, these lesions explain many of your symptoms. The weakness, the vision problems, the cognitive fog. Your brain is literally struggling to send signals properly through damaged pathways. I stared at the images, at the physical proof of my body's rebellion. After months of being called a liar and attention seeker, here was evidence that no one could dismiss. So I'm not crazy. You were never crazy, he said firmly. You have a neurological condition causing real, measurable damage. The pattern and distribution of these lesions, combined with your symptom progression, suggests several possibilities we need to explore further. What kind of possibilities? My voice came out smaller than intended. He pulled up another set of results this time, showing graphs and numbers. Your blood work revealed some interesting markers. Elevated proteins that suggest inflammation in your central nervous system. Antibodies that shouldn't be there. I want to run more specific tests, but Sherry, I need you to prepare yourself. We're looking at the possibility of an autoimmune condition. Autoimmune, I echoed, like my body is attacking itself. Essentially, yes. Your immune system appears to be mistaking your nervous system tissue as a foreign invader and mounting an attack. It would explain the episodic nature of your symptoms, why they come and go, why they're progressively worsening. I thought of my mother's words about attention-seeking, about drama and weakness. How could I explain that my own body had turned traitor, that this wasn't a choice or a performance, but a civil war I couldn't control? What's the next step? I asked, forcing myself to focus on action rather than emotion. I want to do a lumbar puncture, analyze your cerebrospinal fluid. It's uncomfortable, but necessary. We're also going to run a panel of specialized antibody tests. Some of these conditions are rare, and we need to be thorough. He paused, studying my face. How are you managing emotionally? This is a lot to process. The question broke something in me. After months of medical professionals treating me like a hypochondriac, having a doctor acknowledge the emotional impact felt revolutionary. My family doesn't believe me. I might lose my job. I'm terrified and relieved simultaneously because at least now I have proof I'm not lying. Medical gaslighting is traumatic, he said simply. Having your reality denied by people who should support you leaves scars. Are you connected with any support resources? I mentioned Marcus's wife's support group and he nodded approvingly. Good. You'll need community as we navigate this. Can I ask about your family situation? Sometimes understanding the dynamics helps me better support my patients. So I told him about my mother's cruelty, my father's passive, enabling the campaign to discredit me to extended family and even my employer. He listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly grave. "There's something I need to tell you," he said when I finished. "Some of these autoimmune conditions have genetic components. They can run in families, particularly through maternal lines. Has anyone in your family had unexplained neurological symptoms?" My blood chilled. My grandmother. My mother's mother. She died when I was young, but Mom always said it was a mysterious illness. She gets weird when anyone mentions it. Dr. Harrison made a note. It might be worth exploring that history. Sometimes families hide or deny these conditions out of shame or fear. If your grandmother had something similar, then my mother might have it too, I finished, or could develop it. It's possible. These conditions can skip generations or manifest differently in family members. Your mother's reaction to your illness might be more complex than simple dismissal. We scheduled the lumbar puncture for the following week, and he gave me a thick packet of information about various autoimmune conditions affecting the nervous system. As I prepared to leave, he stopped me with a gentle hand on my arm. "Sherry, I need you to understand something. Whatever we find, whatever the specific diagnosis, you're starting a long journey. These conditions are manageable, but not curable. You'll need to make significant life adjustments. But you're not alone. My team and I will be with you every step." I left his office clutching the information packet and something even more valuable, concrete evidence of my illness. The MRI images, the blood test, results, the medical vocabulary that gave names to my experiences. No one could look at brain lesions and call them attention-seeking behavior. At home, I spread the papers across my kitchen table and began reading. Multiple sclerosis, neuromyelitis optica, autoimmune encephalitis. Each condition described symptoms I recognized, painting pictures of bodies, betraying their owners in familiar ways. The medical language felt like a new vocabulary for experiences I'd been unable to articulate. My phone rang. "Amy." "How did it go?" she asked immediately. He found brain lesions, actual visible damage on the MRI, and blood markers suggesting autoimmune activity. Saying it aloud made it more real. "I'm not crazy, Amy. There's actually something wrong with me." "I knew it," she said fiercely. "I knew those symptoms were real. Have you told Mom and Dad?" "Not yet. I'm still processing. But Dr. Harrison mentioned something interesting. These conditions can be genetic. He asked about family history." Amy was quiet for a moment. "Grandma Ruth, you remember her being sick?" "Not really. I was too young. But I remember Mom getting weird about it. And once, when I was in high school, I found some old medical bills in the attic. Neurologist visits, hospital stays. When I asked Mom about them, she said I had no business snooping and threw them away. She's been hiding this," I said, pieces clicking into place. "What if Grandma had what I have? What if Mom knows exactly what's happening to me because she watched it happen before?" "That would explain so much," Amy breathed. "The anger, the denial, the accusations of attention-seeking. She's not dismissing you, she's terrified." "That doesn't excuse what she's done," I said, anger flaring. "Calling my boss, turning family against me, throwing my journal in the trash. Fear doesn't justify cruelty." "No, it doesn't, but it might explain it." What are you going to do? I looked at the brain scans Dr. Harrison had printed for me, the white spots scattered like stars against the gray matter. First, I'm going to get through the rest of these tests, get a definitive diagnosis. Then maybe I'll have a conversation with our mother about family medical history and the cost of denial. After we hung up, I sat with my coffee-stained journal and began a new entry. But this time, instead of just documenting symptoms, I wrote about vindication, about the strange relief of brain lesions and blood markers, about a doctor who believed me before the tests, not just after, about the possibility that my suffering was part of a larger family pattern, hidden and denied for generations. The tremor in my hands had worsened throughout the day, making my handwriting nearly illegible, but I persisted, needing to document this moment when everything shifted from maybe to definitely, from attention-seeking to autoimmune. That night, I dreamed of my grandmother. I barely remembered her, just impressions of soft hands and a voice that shook. In the dream, she sat beside me in Dr. Harrison's office, looking at brain scans that might have been hers or mine. "They didn't have these machines when I was sick," she said sadly. "No way to prove what was happening inside. Just suspicion and shame and doctors who said it was all in my head." "But I have proof now," I told her. "I can show them." She smiled, but it was tinged with sorrow. "Proof doesn't always change hearts, sweetheart. Sometimes people need their denial more than they need the truth." I woke with tears on my cheeks and a determination burning in my chest. Proof might not change my mother's heart, but it would change my approach. I was done begging for belief. Armed with medical evidence and professional validation, I could demand accommodation, pursue treatment, and build a life that honored my body's new reality. The next morning brought a call from HR. Janet had reported the presentation incident, and they needed to discuss options moving forward. I scheduled the meeting for after my lumbar puncture, giving myself time to gather medical documentation. If they wanted to push out an employee with a documented neurological condition, I'd make sure they understood the legal ramifications. But first, I had a support group to attend. Marcus's wife had texted me the details, and I decided to go that evening. Walking into a room full of strangers felt daunting, but less so than facing this journey alone. The community center was brightly lit with chairs arranged in a circle and a coffee station that reminded me of AA meetings in movies. But the people gathering looked remarkably ordinary. Different ages, races, genders, all united by invisible battles against their own bodies. "You must be Sherry." A woman approached with a warm smile. "I'm Diana Marcus's wife. He told me you might come tonight." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "This feels very real." She laughed gently. "I know, the first meeting is hard, admitting you need support, that you can't fight this alone. But trust me, this room will become a lifeline." As people settled into chairs, I noticed the variety of mobility aids scattered around. Canes walkers, one wheelchair. Tools of adaptation I might need someday, normalized and unremarkable here. The meeting began with introductions. Each person shared their name, condition, and something they were struggling with or celebrating. The honesty was breathtaking. "I'm Joan, I have lupus, and this week I'm celebrating 3 days without a flare." "Marcus here, fibromyalgia, struggling with a new medication that makes me foggy." Annie MS, frustrated with family members who think I'm exaggerating. When my turn came, my voice shook. "I'm Sherry. I'm in the process of being diagnosed with something neurological. My family thinks I'm attention-seeking, and I just found out I have brain lesions." The group's response was immediate and warm. Nods of understanding, murmurs of support, even a few "been there" comments that made me feel less alone. These people understood medical gaslighting, family denial, the strange grief of a body betraying you. They offered practical advice about disability applications, workplace accommodations, managing difficult relatives. But more than that, they offered recognition. In this circle, I wasn't the woman who collapsed dramatically at work. I was just another person navigating the complexity of chronic illness. By the time I left, I had a folder of resources, several phone numbers, and an invitation to a smaller weekly coffee meetup for newly diagnosed people. The tremor in my hands felt less like a shameful secret and more like a membership card to a club I'd never wanted to join but desperately needed. Thanksgiving arrived with its usual demands of family togetherness, but this year felt different. Armed with my MRI results and preliminary diagnosis notes from Dr. Harrison, I decided to attend despite every instinct screaming otherwise. Amy had begged me to come promising to run interference, and some stubborn part of me wanted to face my extended family with medical evidence in hand. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing clothes that wouldn't show tremors and flat shoes for stability. The muscle relaxants Dr. Harrison prescribed helped somewhat, but stress always made symptoms worse. And nothing triggered stress quite like my mother's holiday productions. The house smelled of turkey and tradition when Amy met me at the door. She pulled me into a quick hug, whispering, "Aunt Martha's already 3 wines deep and Mom's in full performance mode. You sure about this?" "No," I admitted, "but hiding feels like letting them win." The dining room buzzed with conversation that stuttered when I appeared. Uncle Dennis raised his beer in mock salute. Well, well, the mystery illness girl graces us with her presence. Dennis. Aunt Martha chided, though her smile was sharp. "Don't be rude, though Patricia did mention you've been having quite the dramatic year, Sherry." I forced a smile, settling into my assigned seat between Cousin Jake and Amy. Jake, home from his 3rd year of medical school, studied me with clinical interest that felt different from the family's mockery. "How are you feeling?" he asked quietly. "Like I'm about to be served as the main course," I muttered, making him chuckle. My mother emerged from the kitchen carrying her famous green bean casserole, every hair perfectly placed, her Thanksgiving apron pristine. She set the dish down with practiced grace, her eyes skating over me as if I were empty chair. "Now that everyone's here," she announced, "let's go around and share what we're thankful for this year." The tradition I'd once found charming now felt like a trap. Each family member recited expected gratitudes, health, prosperity, togetherness. When my turn approached, my hands began their familiar tremor beneath the table. "I'm thankful for doctors who listen," I said clearly, "and for finally getting answers about my health." The silence stretched uncomfortably. My father cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should focus on more positive—" "Brain lesions are positive," I interrupted, surprising myself, "because that's what the MRI showed, actual visible damage to my nervous system. Or is medical evidence too negative for turkey dinner?" "Sherry." My mother's voice could have frozen gravy. "This isn't the time or place." "When is the time, Mom?" "When you're not telling my boss I'm attention-seeking. When you're not poisoning the entire family against me." My voice shook, but I pressed on. "I have a neurological condition, autoimmune. Genetic, actually. Which means—" "Enough." She stood abruptly. "I won't have you ruining Thanksgiving with your dramatics." "Dramatics." I laughed, edge of hysteria creeping in. "I have medical proof. Would you like to see the brain scans, the blood work, or would you prefer to keep pretending I'm making this up?" "You've always been like this," Aunt Martha interjected, wine making her bold. "Even as a child. Remember the school play incident? The birthday party fainting spell Patricia's had to deal with this attention-seeking for decades." "Those weren't attention-seeking," I said through gritted teeth. "They were early symptoms everyone ignored." Jake shifted beside me. "Actually, what Sherry's describing sounds consistent with several autoimmune conditions. The childhood presentations often get dismissed as behavioral issues when they're actually—" "Don't encourage her," my mother snapped. "Jake, you're studying to be a real doctor. You should recognize manipulation when you see it." My hands shook harder and I gripped my water glass to steady them. The tremor traveled up my arms, visible now despite my efforts. Jake noticed immediately, his eyes widening with medical interest rather than judgment. "Sherry," he said quietly, "how long have you had that tremor?" "Months. It's worse when I'm stressed, like now." "Can you hold your arms out straight?" I extended my arms, watching them shake like leaves in a storm. Several family members stared, finally seeing visible evidence of my body's rebellion. Jake gently manipulated my hands, checking resistance and coordination with the practiced movements of clinical examination. "This isn't psychological," he announced. "The tremor pattern, the resistance quality. Aunt Patricia has Sherry shown you her test results. I don't need to see fabricated." "They're not fabricated." I stood too quickly, dizziness making me sway. "God, Mom, what are you so afraid of? Why can't you just—" The room tilted. My left hand went completely numb, releasing the water glass I'd forgotten I was holding. It shattered on grandmother's china water, and crystal shards exploding across the pristine tablecloth. The sound echoed in the sudden silence as I stared at my betraying hand fingers refusing to close despite my commands. My grandmother's Waterford. My mother's shriek pierced through my neurological fog. "That glass was from her wedding set. You destroyed it. You destroy everything." "I can't feel my hand," I said stupidly, still staring at the appendage like it belonged to someone else. "Of course you can't," she raged, moving around the table toward me. "It's always something with you. Always an excuse, always a scene. That glass survived 60 years, and you—" "Patricia." Jake's voice cut through her tirade with medical authority. "Sherry's having neurological symptoms. This isn't about the glass." "Don't tell me what this is about in my own home," she whirled on him. "You're as bad as she is enabling this behavior. That glass was irreplaceable." "Unlike your daughter." The words escaped before I could stop them. "Because you seem pretty willing to throw me away." "Get out!" Her voice went deadly quiet. "Get out of my house!" "Mom," Amy protested, "it's Thanksgiving. She's sick." "She's sick when it's convenient. She's always been sick when she needs attention or wants to avoid responsibility." She turned back to me, eyes hard as the crystal shards glittering on the tablecloth. "I'm done, Sherry. Done with the dramatics, the scenes, the constant crises. Get out." "Patricia." My father finally intervened. "Perhaps we should all calm—" "Don't you dare take her side," she hissed. "Not after everything I've endured with her lies and manipulations." "They're not lies," Jake said firmly. "Aunt Patricia, I've seen enough in medical school to recognize real neurological symptoms. The tremor pattern, the sudden numbness, the way she's compensating for balance issues. These aren't things someone can fake." "Then explain why it only happens during family gatherings," she challenged. "Why she only collapses when there's an audience." "Stress exacerbates autoimmune conditions," Jake replied patiently. "The fact that her symptoms worsen around family who dismiss and belittle her is actually diagnostic. You're literally making her sicker." The truth hung in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle. My mother's face cycled through emotions too quickly to track before settling on cold fury. "How dare you?" she whispered. "How dare you blame me for her choices?" "What choices?" I found my voice again, anger burning through the neurological fog. "The choice to have my immune system attack my brain. The choice to develop lesions. Tell me, Mother, which part of this did I choose? The choice to parade it around like a badge of honor. The choice to make every family gathering about your latest crisis. The choice to be weak." That word weak finally broke something in me. All the months of hiding symptoms, pushing through pain, maintaining my job despite my body's rebellion, and she reduced it to weakness. "You want to know about weakness?" I said, voice steady despite the tremor consuming my entire body now. "Weakness is denying your own mother's illness until she died. Weakness is being so terrified of genetics that you'll sacrifice your daughter to maintain denial. Weakness is—" "Don't you dare mention my mother." The slap happened so fast I didn't see it coming. My already compromised balance failed completely, sending me stumbling backward into Jake, who caught me before I hit the floor. The room erupted. Amy screaming at our mother, Uncle Dennis trying to restore order, Aunt Martha declaring this was why she preferred dogs to children. But all I could focus on was the spreading numbness, now consuming my entire left side like ice water in my veins. "I need to go to the hospital," I said quietly to Jake. "Something's wrong. more wrong than usual. He didn't hesitate. I'm driving you. Amy, get her purse. If you leave this house, my mother said, voice shaking with rage, don't bother coming back. I'm done pretending you're my daughter. I looked at her. Really. Looked at her. Saw the fear beneath the fury, the desperate denial masquerading as strength. I'm done pretending too, I said. Done pretending you're the mother I needed. Done pretending your love was worth destroying myself to earn. Jake guided me toward the door, Amy flanking my other side. Behind us, the family dinner continued its descent into chaos, but I couldn't bring myself to care. The numbness had spread to my face, now making my words slur when I spoke. Thank you, I managed as Jake helped me into his car. Don't thank me yet, he said grimly. We need to get you evaluated. This looks like a significant relapse. As we pulled away from my childhood home, I watched it shrink in the side mirror. My mother stood silhouetted in the doorway, still as a statue, watching her sick daughter leave, rather than admit the possibility of inherited illness. She's terrified, Amy said quietly from the back seat. Grandma Ruth died badly, Sherry. Mom was her caregiver at the end. I think seeing you sick brings it all back. That's not an excuse, Jake said firmly. Fear doesn't justify abuse, and make no mistake, what just happened was abuse. I closed my eyes, letting their voices wash over me as we drove toward the hospital. The numbness felt different this time, deeper and more persistent. But underneath the fear was an odd relief. The pretense was over. The family dinner from hell had finally revealed truths we'd all been dancing around. My mother had shown her true face, and I'd shown mine. Both of us had broken character in that dining room, shattering illusions as thoroughly as grandmother's crystal. There would be no going back from this Thanksgiving, no pretending at future gatherings that we were anything other than strangers, bound by blood and divided by truth. The hospital kept me overnight after Thanksgiving, pumping me full of IV steroids to calm the inflammation in my nervous system. Jake stayed until they admitted me using his medical student status to ensure I got proper attention. Amy camped out in the uncomfortable visitor's chair, refusing to leave despite my protests. Someone from your family should act like family, she'd said fiercely, and that had ended the argument. By Friday afternoon, I was home again, exhausted but functional. The steroids had reduced the worst of the symptoms, though my left hand still felt clumsy and my balance remained uncertain. I spent the weekend recovering, dreading Monday's scheduled appointment with Dr. Harrison for specialized blood test results. But Sunday evening, my phone rang with his office number. Sherry, it's Dr. Harrison. I know your appointment isn't until tomorrow, but I've been reviewing your results, and I think we should talk tonight. Can you come in? The urgency in his voice sent ice through my veins. Is something wrong? I mean, more wrong than we already knew. I'd prefer to discuss this in person. I'll meet you at my office in an hour. The drive felt endless, every terrible possibility cycling through my mind. Cancer, ALS, some rare disease that would kill me within months. By the time I parked, my hands shook from more than just the tremor. Dr. Harrison met me at the door himself, the empty office building echoing our footsteps. His expression was serious, but not grim, which I took as a minor comfort. Thank you for coming, he said, leading me to his office. I wanted to discuss these results immediately because they're significant. He pulled up multiple computer screens showing lab results, graphs, and medical terminology I couldn't parse. But I recognized my name on every report, my birth date, marking these documents as the map of my body's rebellion. The specialized antibody panel came back positive for several markers. He began highlighting specific results, but this one is particularly notable. He pointed to a line reading, anti-MOG antibodies, positive high titer. What does that mean? MOG stands for myelin oligodendrocyte glycoprotein. It's a protein found in the protective coating around nerve fibers. Your immune system has created antibodies against it, which means it's actively attacking your nervous system's insulation. I stared at the results, trying to process. So it's definitely autoimmune. Yes, Specifically, you have what we call MOG antibody disease. It's relatively rare, often misdiagnosed as multiple sclerosis. But here's what makes your case particularly interesting. He pulled up another screen. These markers suggest a strong genetic component. The specific pattern the antibody levels, the age of onset, it all points to inherited susceptibility. My grandmother, I said quietly. She had something similar, didn't she? Without her medical records, I can't say definitively, but based on what you've told me about her symptoms and progression, it's highly likely. He leaned back, studying me. Sherry, has your mother ever been tested? She won't even admit Grandma was really sick. Testing would mean acknowledging the possibility. I understand, but here's what you need to know. MOG antibody disease is treatable. Not curable, but treatable. With proper medication, we can prevent relapses, reduce symptoms, even achieve remission. The key is aggressive treatment early before more damage accumulates. What kind of treatment? He outlined the options: immunosuppressants, regular infusions medications, with names I couldn't pronounce. The side effects sounded daunting, the lifestyle changes significant. But it was hope, real hope, not just for management, but for actual improvement. There's something else, he said, pulling up yet another screen. Your inflammatory markers are extremely high, even for MOG disease. Have you been under significant stress recently? I laughed, edge of hysteria creeping in. My mother disowned me at Thanksgiving. My job's in jeopardy. My family thinks I'm lying about being sick. So yes, you could say there's been some stress. His expression softened. Family rejection during chronic illness is unfortunately common, especially with invisible conditions. The stress is literally making your disease worse. Your numbers here, he pointed to specific results, show inflammation levels consistent with severe psychological distress. Your mother isn't just wrong about your illness, she's actively exacerbating it. The clinical confirmation of what Jake had suggested hit hard. My mother's denial wasn't just emotionally damaging, it was physically harmful. Her rejection was literally feeding the disease, destroying my nervous system. I want to start treatment immediately, Dr. Harrison continued. The sooner we suppress this immune response, the better chance we have of preventing permanent damage. Some of these lesions can heal if we act quickly. Whatever it takes, I agreed. I'm ready. We scheduled my first infusion for later that week, and he gave me prescriptions for medications to start immediately. As I prepared to leave, he stopped me with a gentle hand on my arm. Sherry, I need you to understand something. This diagnosis, it's actually good news. MOG disease responds well to treatment. Many patients achieve near normal function with proper management. You're not looking at inevitable decline. But my grandmother died in an era before we understood these diseases, before MRIs, before antibody testing, before modern immunotherapy. You have options she never did. He smiled encouragingly. Don't let fear of her outcome dictate yours. I drove home in a dazed diagnosis echoing in my mind. MOG antibody disease. Rare but treatable. Genetic but manageable. Everything my mother feared made real, but also made survivable. At home, I spread out the information packets Dr. Harrison had given me. Medical journals, patient resources, treatment protocols. The reading felt like archaeology, digging through scientific language to understand my body's civil war. But knowledge felt like power, after months of confusion. Amy arrived as I was highlighting a passage about genetic inheritance patterns. She took one look at the papers scattered across my table and sat down hard. So it's official. MOG antibody disease, autoimmune, genetic, treatable. I showed her the test results, the undeniable numbers that proved my truth. Grandma probably had it too. Jesus, Amy breathed. Mom's going to lose her mind when she finds out. If she finds out. I'm done trying to convince her of reality. I gathered the papers carefully, creating a file I'd need for work, for insurance, for the life I'd need to rebuild around this diagnosis. But Amy, you should get tested. If it's genetic. She nodded slowly. Already planning to. Jake wants to get tested too, and he's convincing his siblings. If this runs in the family, we all need to know. We talked for hours processing the implications. Amy showed me texts from various family members, the Thanksgiving disaster having created clear camps. Some sided with my mother dismissing Jake's medical opinion as student naivety. Others quietly questioned whether they'd been wrong about my attention-seeking. Uncle Dennis called Dad, Amy reported. Said Mom went too far. Dad defended her, of course, but even he sounded uncertain. It doesn't matter anymore. I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. I have proof. I have treatment options. I have a future that doesn't require their belief. Monday morning brought 2 phone calls. The first from HR scheduling a meeting to discuss accommodation options, now that I had official diagnosis documentation. The second from my mother. I almost didn't answer, but morbid curiosity won. Sherry. Her voice was ice. I heard you went to the hospital on Thanksgiving. Another dramatic gesture, I assume. I had a relapse triggered by family stress, I said calmly. My neurologist says emotional trauma can worsen autoimmune conditions. Interesting how that works. Silence, then. What do you want? Nothing. I have my diagnosis. MOG antibody disease. Genetic, by the way. Inherited through the maternal line. Just like whatever Grandma Ruth had. The sharp intake of breath was audible. You don't know what your grandmother had. No, because you destroyed her medical records and maintained decades of denial. But I know what I have, and genetics don't lie. I pulled up the inheritance pattern data. 50% chance of passing it to children. Higher likelihood of expression in females, often triggered by stress or trauma in genetically susceptible individuals. Stop. Her voice cracked slightly. Just stop. I'm starting treatment this week. Immunosuppressants and regular infusions. With luck, I can achieve remission. Something Grandma never had the chance for because medical science has advanced significantly since you watched her die. How dare you? I dare because I'm not going to die like she did. I dare because I refuse to let fear and denial steal my future. I dare because I finally understand that your cruelty comes from terror, not lack of love. I took a breath. But understanding doesn't mean forgiving. You made your choice at Thanksgiving. Now live with it. I hung up before she could respond, my hands surprisingly steady. The tremor that had plagued me for months felt quieter, as if naming the enemy had stolen some of its power. That evening, I attended the chronic illness support group again. This time, when we went around the circle, I had a different introduction. I'm Sherry. I have MOG antibody disease. This week, I'm celebrating finally having a diagnosis and starting treatment. The applause was warm and genuine. Diana hugged me after whispering, "The diagnosis changes everything. Now you can fight with the right weapons." Several members shared their own diagnosis stories, the relief of naming the unnamed, the power of proof after dismissal. We talked about treatment options, insurance battles, the strange grief of accepting a chronic illness, but also about hope adaptation, the life possible beyond diagnosis. My family still doesn't believe I'm really sick, one woman shared. Even with the diagnosis, they think I'm exaggerating. Some people need their denial more than they need the truth, I said, echoing my grandmother's dream words. We can't control their beliefs, only our response to them. The meeting ended with exchanged numbers and promises of support. I drove home feeling less alone than I had in months, part of a community I'd never wanted to join, but desperately needed. That night, I wrote in my journal with steadier hands, "Today I learned my enemy's name, MOG antibody disease. It sounds almost mundane, written out this thing that's been destroying my nervous system, but naming it gives me power. Treatment gives me hope. And strangely, my mother's rejection gives me freedom. I no longer need to convince anyone of my reality. The blood doesn't lie even when family does." I closed the journal and prepared for bed. Tomorrow's infusion appointment circled on my calendar. The road ahead was long paved with medications and lifestyle changes and medical appointments. But it was a road, not a cliff. That made all the difference. 3 weeks into treatment, I felt like a different person. The immunosuppressants had calmed my overactive immune system, and the tremor that had defined my days now only appeared during extreme stress. I could button my own shirts again, hold a coffee cup without fear, walk without constantly monitoring my balance. The improvement felt miraculous, even though Dr. Harrison warned me about the honeymoon period common with new treatment. Amy had been my constant support, driving me to infusions and staying during the hours-long process. We'd developed a routine. She'd bring her laptop and grade papers while I dozed in the recliner, poison dripping into my veins to save my life. It was during my 4th infusion that she brought up our mother. "She's been calling me," Amy said carefully, "asking about you. She pretends it's casual, but I can tell she's desperate for information." "What do you tell her?" "Nothing specific, just that you're managing." She paused. "Dad came by my apartment yesterday. First time he's ever visited without her. He looked terrible, Sherry. Asked if your diagnosis was real." "After everything he still doubts?" "I showed him the paperwork you gave me. The test results, the MRI images. He stared at those brain scans for like 10 minutes without speaking." Amy's voice dropped. "He said Grandma's scans looked similar near the end." I nearly dropped my water bottle. "He saw Grandma's medical records. Apparently. Mom doesn't know he kept copies. He's had them in a safe deposit box for 20 years. Amy pulled out her phone. "He gave me this." The photo showed a yellowed medical report, different terminology, older technology, but the pattern was unmistakable. Lesions, inflammation, progressive neurological decline, my grandmother's name at the top, her death certificate diagnosis at the bottom, complications from unspecified autoimmune encephalopathy. "She had it," I breathed. "She actually had what I have." Dad thinks Mom's been in denial since before Grandma died. She convinced herself it was psychiatric, that Grandma gave up, that weakness, killed her, not disease. Then you started showing symptoms. And every tremor, every collapse, every symptom reminded her of what she'd spent decades denying. I closed my eyes. It doesn't excuse anything. "No," Amy agreed. "But Dad wants to talk. Both of them do, I think. He mentioned maybe meeting somewhere neutral." I considered this during the remaining 2 hours of my infusion. Part of me wanted to maintain the clean break to protect my newfound stability from their toxic influence. But another part, the part that had inherited more than just autoimmune disease from my mother's line, wondered if truth might finally break through denial. "Set it up," I decided as the nurse removed my IV. "But on my terms, and I want witnesses." The meeting was arranged for the following Sunday at Amy's apartment. Neutral ground with my sister as mediator and, at my insistence, Jake present for medical support. I also invited Diana from my support group, wanting someone who understood chronic illness dynamics, to witness whatever unfolded. I arrived early, setting out my medical files on Amy's coffee table like evidence for trial. Test results, MRI images, treatment protocols, even a printed article about MOG antibody disease and genetic inheritance. If they wanted truth, I'd give them documentation. My parents arrived exactly on time, my father supporting my mother's elbow as if she were the fragile one. She'd aged in the weeks since Thanksgiving, her perfect composure cracked around the edges. They sat on Amy's couch like defendants while I took the chair across from them. "Thank you for coming," I began formally. "You look better," my mother said stiffly. "The treatment must be working." "It is. Amazing what proper medical care can accomplish when you actually have a real disease." She flinched but didn't respond. My father cleared his throat. "Sherry, we owe you an apology. I owe you an apology." He pulled out a folder I recognized. "I should have shown you these years ago." Grandma Ruth's medical records spread across the table between us. Reports, test results, hospital notes documenting a progression hauntingly familiar. I picked up a neurologist's report from 2 years before her death, the language outdated, but the observations clear. Patient presents with progressive weakness, tremor, and cognitive decline. I read aloud. Family reports personality changes and attention-seeking behavior, but clinical examination reveals organic neurological disease. She had it. She had MOG disease or something similar, and they called her attention-seeking too. That's not... My mother started, then stopped. Her hands twisted in her lap, the same nervous gesture I'd developed during my worst symptoms. You don't understand what it was like. Then explain it, I challenged. Explain why you spent my entire life denying what you watched happen to your own mother. She was quiet so long I thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. She was so strong before. My mother was invincible. She raised 4 children, ran a household, never complained. Then suddenly she was falling down, forgetting our names, crying over nothing. She looked at her hands. The doctors had no answers. Some said it was mental breakdown. Others suggested early dementia. One even told my father she was faking for attention. So when I started having symptoms, I couldn't watch it again. The words came out raw, stripped of her usual control. I convinced myself you were different, that if I didn't acknowledge it, didn't enable it, you'd snap out of it. Because the alternative was admitting your daughter had the same disease that killed your mother, Diana said gently. The same genetic condition you might carry yourself. My mother's head snapped up, seeming to notice Diana for the first time. Who are you? Someone who understands medical denial. My mother did the same thing when I was diagnosed with lupus. Spent years telling me I was lazy, dramatic attention-seeking. Fear makes people cruel sometimes. I wasn't cruel, my mother protested. I was trying to protect yourself, I interrupted. You were protecting yourself. Every time you called me attention-seeking, every dismissal, every public humiliation, you were protecting yourself from the possibility that Grandma's illness lived in our genes. What was I supposed to do? Her composure finally cracked completely. Watch you deteriorate like she did. Plan another funeral for someone who should outlive me. I couldn't, Sherry. I couldn't do it again. So instead, you abandoned me when I needed you most. Called my boss, poisoned my relationships, threw my symptom journal in the trash, made my illness about your trauma instead of my reality. Jake shifted forward. Mrs. Peterson, have you ever been tested? Given the genetic component, no. The word shot out like a bullet, and I won't be. Mom, Amy said carefully, if you have the antibodies but no symptoms yet, early treatment could prevent... I said, no, I don't have it. I've never had symptoms. The tremor in your hands says otherwise, I observed quietly. Everyone looked at her hands, still twisted in her lap, but visibly shaking. She shoved them under her thighs, but the damage was done. We'd all seen it. That's just age, she said desperately. Stress from dealing with your sick daughter who reminds you of your sick mother. I pulled out the article on genetic inheritance. 50% chance of passing it on, higher expression in women, often dormant until triggered by stress or trauma. Sound familiar? Stop. My father reached for her hand. Patricia, maybe you should... I'm not sick. She stood abruptly, the tremor now visible in her whole frame. I'm not my mother, and I'm not Sherry. I'm fine. You're terrified, I said, standing to face her. And I understand that. But your terror doesn't erase my reality. I have MOG antibody disease. I inherited it through your genetic line, and I'm not going to die from it because, unlike Grandma, I have access to treatment. You don't know you won't die, she whispered. The treatments might fail. You might progress like she did. I might, but probably not. The medication is working. My symptoms are improving. I have a medical team that believes me and a treatment plan based on actual science, not denial. I gathered my medical files. I'm going to live, Mom, with or without your support. The question is whether you want to be part of that life. She stared at me, this daughter who refused to follow the script of either recovery or decline she'd written in her mind. I saw the war in her face between mother's love and decades of protective denial. I need time, she finally said. This is a lot to process. 28 years wasn't enough time, but I softened slightly at the genuine confusion in her eyes. Fine, process, but know this, I'm done begging for your belief. I'm done hiding my symptoms to protect your feelings. I'm done being ashamed of an illness I didn't choose. We should go, my father said quietly. Thank you for meeting with us, Sherry, and for sharing the medical information. We have a lot to discuss. They left slowly, my mother leaning on my father more heavily than when they'd arrived. At the door, she turned back. The treatment, she said haltingly, it's really working. Yes, I still have bad days, but fewer of them. The tremor's mostly gone. My balance is better. I can think clearly again. I met her eyes. I'm not cured. I never will be. But I'm managing. I'm living. Something flickered in her expression. Not quite acceptance, but maybe the beginning of possibility. Then they were gone, leaving the rest of us in exhausted silence. That was intense, Jake said finally, but I think you got through to her. Maybe. I sank back into the chair. Or maybe she'll double down on denial. Either way, I said what I needed to say. Diana squeezed my shoulder. You did beautifully. Set boundaries while leaving room for reconnection if she chooses it. That takes incredible strength. Amy started crying quietly. I hate this. I hate that our family is broken over something none of us chose. It's not broken over the illness, I corrected gently. It's broken over the response to illness. That was a choice, but choices can change. We talked for another hour, processing the confrontation and its implications. Jake offered to provide medical information if my mother ever wanted it. Diana shared resources for families dealing with genetic conditions. Amy just held my hand, sister solidarity in the face of family fracture. That night, I wrote in my journal, faced my mother with truth today. Not sure if it penetrated decades of denial, but I spoke my reality without apology. She saw Grandma in me. I saw myself in her trembling hands. We're all afraid, but fear doesn't have to mean cruelty. I choose differently. I choose truth treatment and the difficult grace of leaving doors open while protecting my heart. The genetic legacy stops here, not the disease that's beyond my control, but the denial. That dies with me. 2 days after the confrontation at Amy's apartment, my father called. His voice sounded different, older somehow, weighted with something I couldn't identify. Sherry, I need to see you, alone without your mother. There are things you need to know about our family's medical history. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, the kind of place where serious conversations could happen without interruption. He looked haggard, the composed businessman facade completely absent. In his hands was a worn manila envelope that he placed between us like a confession. Before I show you this, he began, I need you to understand that I've kept these secrets to protect your mother. But after Sunday, after seeing her hands shake just like Ruth's did, he trailed off, staring at his coffee. Dad, what is it? He opened the envelope, revealing documents I'd never seen. Medical records, but not just Grandma Ruth's. These went back further, names I recognized from family trees and old photographs. Your great-grandmother Ruth's mother, Margaret. He pointed to a death certificate from 1947. Cause of death listed as nervous breakdown leading to physical decline. But look at the symptoms described. I read the faded typing, progressive weakness tremors, difficulty walking, emotional instability. The same pattern, just dressed in different medical language. She had it too. We think so. And her sister, your great-great-aunt Helen, hysteria leading to paralysis. They called it in 1952. More papers, more familiar symptoms dismissed as female weakness. I've traced it back 4 generations, Sherry. Always the women, always dismissed as mental illness until their bodies failed completely. 4 generations. The weight of that history settled on my chest, and Mom knows. She knows about Ruth and Margaret, the others I found on my own researching after your diagnosis. He pulled out another document. But this is what I really needed to show you. It was a medical report from Johns Hopkins dated 3 years ago. My mother's name at the top. She got tested. I grabbed the paper, scanning rapidly. But she said, she lied. His voice was flat. She's been lying to everyone, including herself. Look at the results. There it was in black and white. Positive for MOG antibodies, lower levels than mine but undeniably present. Notes about early symptoms, mild tremor, occasional balance issues, fatigue, recommendations for monitoring and potential preventive treatment. She has it. I stared at the proof of my mother's deepest fear confirmed. She has the antibodies. She knows she has it. She went for testing after a bad episode. Thought she was having a stroke, but the scans showed early lesions. The doctor recommended immediate treatment to prevent progression. He laughed bitterly. She threw the report in the fire when we got home. Said if she didn't acknowledge it, it couldn't be real. That's not how disease works. I know. God, Sherry, I know. I've watched her pretend for 3 years. Seen her hide tremors, make excuses for balance problems, blame fatigue on everything except the obvious. He rubbed his face. And when you started showing symptoms, it was her nightmare made real, proof that denial doesn't stop biology. So she tortured me instead, made my life hell because she couldn't face her own diagnosis. I'm not excusing it, he said quickly. What she did to you was unconscionable, but I need you to understand the depth of her terror. She watched Ruth die badly, Sherry. Those final months. He shuddered. Your grandmother lost everything. Motor function, speech, eventually even recognition of family. Patricia was her primary caregiver, 23 years old, watching her vibrant mother disappear into a body that wouldn't obey. I thought of my own fear during the worst symptoms, the terror of losing control. Multiply that by watching it happen to someone you love, knowing you might carry the same genetic time bomb. She should have told me, I said finally. When I first got sick, she should have said, I have this too, let's fight it together. She should have. But she'd spent so long building walls against that possibility, she couldn't tear them down. Even for you. He reached across the table, taking my hand. I'm telling you now, because those walls are finally cracking. Sunday shook her badly. Seeing your improvement, hearing about effective treatment, it's challenging everything she believed about inevitability. What am I supposed to do with this information? Whatever you need to. I'm not asking you to forgive her or reconcile. I'm just trying to help you understand. He squeezed my hand. And selfishly, I'm hoping maybe knowing the full truth will help you decide whether to leave that door open a crack. We sat in silence while I processed. 4 generations of women with this disease. 4 generations of medical dismissal of symptoms attributed to female hysteria or attention-seeking. My mother trapped between inherited illness and inherited trauma, choosing denial over truth until it poisoned everything. Does Amy know about Mom's diagnosis? No, Patricia made me swear, but I'm breaking that promise now because secrets are killing this family. He pulled out one more document. There's something else. Amy's test results. My heart stopped. She got tested already. Last week. She didn't want to worry you until she knew. He handed me the paper. Negative. No antibodies, no markers. She escaped it. Relief flooded through me so intensely I nearly collapsed. My little sister, at least, was free from this genetic curse. Jake's results are pending, he continued. But given it primarily affects women in our family line, he's probably safe. I looked back at Mom's hidden diagnosis. What about treatment? Is she getting any? No, she refuses. Says taking medication would mean admitting she's sick. His voice cracked. I watch her deteriorate bit by bit, and there's nothing I can do. She won't let me help her any more than she let you help yourself. That's her choice, I said, surprising myself with the coldness in my voice. Just like abandoning me was her choice. I know, I'm not asking you to save her. I'm tired of secrets, Sherry. Tired of pretending. tired of enabling her denial while watching both of you suffer. Then stop, I suggested. Stop enabling, stop keeping her secrets, stop letting her narrative control the family. Easier said than done after 35 years of marriage. I did it after 28 years of being her daughter. He smiled sadly. You're stronger than me. Always have been. Ruth would be proud of how you've handled this. I wish I could have known her. Really known her, not just the family mythology. She was brilliant, he said softly, before the illness took hold. Sharp, funny, irreverent. She would have loved your fighting spirit. Used to say the women in our family were too stubborn to die easy. His smile faded. Turns out, stubbornness isn't enough against autoimmune disease. No, but modern medicine might be. We finished our coffee, the weight of family history heavy between us. As we prepared to leave, I made a decision. Tell Mom I know about her diagnosis. Tell her I'm willing to share information about my treatment if she ever wants it. But I won't beg, and I won't pretend her denial is acceptable. I'll tell her. Don't expect miracles, though. 3 years of hiding is hard to overcome. I'm not expecting anything anymore, just offering what I wished someone had offered me, acknowledgement and help. He hugged me goodbye, the first real embrace we'd shared in years. In his arms, I felt the weight of his complicity, but also his genuine love, complicated and imperfect, but real. That evening, I called Amy and told her everything. She cried through most of it, anger and relief and frustration mixing in her responses. I can't believe Mom hid her diagnosis while torturing you for yours, she said finally. Actually, no. I can totally believe it. It's exactly the kind of twisted logic she operates under. The question is what we do now. Do we confront her support dad? Pretend we don't know? I vote for truth, Amy said firmly. No more secrets, no more denial. If this disease has taught our family anything, it should be that hiding from reality only makes it worse. Even if truth destroys what's left of our relationship with her, what relationship? She's been gone since your first symptoms appeared, Sherry. Maybe longer. Maybe she's been gone since Grandma died and she decided weakness was the enemy rather than disease. I thought about that late into the night. 4 generations of women fighting the same battle, but only I had the weapons of modern medicine and hard-won self-advocacy. The genetic legacy would continue, written in DNA I couldn't change. But the behavioral legacy, the denial and cruelty and abandonment that could stop with me. Before bed, I wrote in my journal, "Today, I learned I'm the latest in a long line of women with rebellious immune systems. Great-great-grandmother Margaret, great-aunt Helen, Grandma Ruth, and yes, my mother. All of us marked by the same genetic mutation, all of us failed by medical systems that preferred to call us hysterical rather than ill. But I'm the first with real treatment, the first to name the enemy and fight with science rather than silence. The disease may be inherited, but denial doesn't have to be. I choose differently. For me, for Amy, for any daughters who might come after. The family's secret dies in daylight." I closed the journal and took my evening medications, immunosuppressants that kept my body from destroying itself. Such a simple solution to generations of suffering. If only truth were as easy to swallow as pills. The insurance denial letter arrived on a Tuesday, the same day I was scheduled for my monthly infusion. I read it 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding the corporate language designed to obscure cruelty. "We regret to inform you that your request for continued immunoglobulin therapy has been denied. After reviewing your case, our medical team has determined this treatment to be experimental and not medically necessary for your condition." Not medically necessary. The treatment that had given me back my life, that had stopped the lesions from spreading, that kept me functional, not medically necessary. I called Dr. Harrison's office immediately. "I was afraid of this," he said when I read him the letter. "Insurance companies often deny coverage for MOG antibody disease because it's rare. They claim the treatments are experimental despite clear evidence of efficacy. What do I do? I can't afford these infusions out of pocket. They're $8,000 each. We appeal. I'll write a letter of medical necessity. We'll document everything: your improvement, the risks of stopping treatment, the peer-reviewed studies supporting this protocol." He paused. "In the meantime, can you cover 1 or 2 infusions while we fight?" I did the math. My savings, already depleted from previous medical costs, might cover 1, maybe 2 if I emptied my retirement account. "I'll figure it out." But figuring it out meant sacrificing everything I'd worked to build. I sold my good jewelry, the pieces inherited from Grandma Ruth that my mother hadn't claimed. I negotiated payment plans with the infusion center. I took on freelance work despite my energy limitations, writing marketing copy late into nights when tremors permitted. Amy helped where she could, but teacher salaries didn't stretch far. Jake, still in medical school, offered his loan money, which I refused. My father slipped checks into my mailbox always when my mother wouldn't notice, but even those barely dented the mounting costs. 2 weeks into the appeal process, Jennifer, my boss who'd witnessed my conference room collapse, called me into her office. I expected termination, had prepared myself for it, but her expression held something different. "I've been doing research," she began without preamble, "about MOG antibody disease, about invisible disabilities, about how badly I handled your situation." I sat frozen, uncertain where this was heading. "My daughter called me out," she continued, "said I was part of the problem, treating your medical crisis like a personal failing. She was right. I let my concerns about company image override basic human decency. Jennifer, Let me finish. I've spoken with the board. Morrison Marketing wants to make this right. We're creating a medical crisis fund for employees starting immediately, and we're covering the gap in your treatment costs while you fight insurance." I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "You're what?" $8,000 a month, right? For the infusions, we'll cover it for up to 6 months while appeals process." She slid a document across the desk. "Legal drew this up. No strings, no requirements, except that you continue contributing your excellent work as your health allows." "Why?" The word came out strangled. "Because it's right. Because we failed you when you needed support. Because Marcus threatened to quit and take half the creative team with him if we didn't step up." She smiled slightly. "And because your presentation materials, even mid-collapse, were still better than anything else we had for Richardson. They renewed their contract based on your strategy." I signed the papers with shaking hands, this time from emotion rather than symptoms. Corporate compassion felt as foreign as my autoimmune disease once had, but equally real. The relief lasted exactly 1 week before my mother entered the story again. I was at the infusion center halfway through my 6-hour treatment when she appeared. No warning, no announcement, just suddenly there in the doorway, looking like she'd aged a decade in the weeks since our confrontation. "Don't," I said immediately. "Whatever you're here to say, I don't want to hear it. Not here, not during treatment." She ignored me, taking the visitor's chair Amy usually occupied. Her hands, I noticed, shook worse than before, and she'd developed the slight head tremor I recognized from my own worst days. "Your father told me," she said quietly, "about showing you my test results, about breaking his promise." "Good for him. Someone in this family should tell the truth." "I've been living with this for 3 years," she continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Hiding it, fighting it, pretending it away, watching you get diagnosed, get treatment, get better while she gestured at herself, "while I got worse. That was your choice." "I know." The admission seemed to cost her physically. "I've made so many wrong choices, Sherry, starting with turning my mother's illness into a character flaw, then doing the same to you, and now what? You want forgiveness. Understanding my treatment protocol." I watched the IV drip medicine flowing into my veins while my mother sat untreated by choice. "What exactly do you want from me?" "I want to know how you did it," she said simply. "How you face this disease without letting it destroy you, because it's destroying me, and not just physically." I finally looked at her fully. She was right, the destruction went beyond physical symptoms. Her perfect composure had crumbled, leaving someone hollow and frightened. The mother who'd terrorized me with her denial had been replaced by a woman confronting her worst fears made manifest. I faced it because I had to, I said finally, because denial was killing me faster than the disease, because I deserved better than slow deterioration while people called me attention-seeking. I called you that. Her voice broke. My own daughter suffering from the same thing killing me, and I called you attention-seeking. What kind of mother does that? A terrified one, a traumatized one who thought denial could change biology. I shifted the IV tube, pulling slightly. But reasons aren't excuses, Mom. You hurt me when I was most vulnerable. You nearly cost me my job, my relationships, my sanity. That damage doesn't disappear because you're scared. I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking. She paused, seeming to gather courage. I'm asking for help. I want to start treatment, but I don't know how. The doctors I've seen, they don't understand MOG disease like yours does. I need what you have. Dr. Harrison, I said after a long moment. I'll give you his information. Tell him I referred you. He's excellent with difficult cases and family dynamics. She pulled out her phone, adding the contact with trembling fingers. We sat in silence for several minutes, the IV pump's rhythmic clicking the only sound. It's working, she said suddenly, gesturing at my IV. The treatment. You look alive again. It saved my life. Could save yours too if you let it. Do you really believe that I could get better? I saw it then, the terror she'd been carrying. Not just of the disease, but of hope itself. Hope meant admitting how much time she'd wasted, how much suffering she'd caused and endured unnecessarily. I'm sitting here, aren't I, walking, talking, working, living. 6 months ago, I couldn't hold a pencil. Yesterday, I ran 2 miles. I met her eyes. It's not a cure. I'll need treatment forever. But it's life, real life, not just survival. She absorbed this hope and regret warring on her face. I've been so stupid. Yes, I agreed, not softening it. But stupid doesn't have to be permanent. A laugh escaped her, rusty and surprised. You certainly didn't get your bluntness from your father. Got it from Grandma Ruth, according to Dad, along with the faulty immune system. She would have loved these treatments, my mother said softly, would have fought insurance companies with her bare hands to get them. Then honor her by fighting for yourself. Get treatment. Live better than she could. We sat together through the remainder of my infusion, not reconciled but not at war. When the nurse removed my IV, my mother helped me stand her own unsteadiness, making the gesture both touching and absurd. I'll call Dr. Harrison tomorrow, she promised. And Sherry, I'm sorry. That's inadequate, I know, but I'm sorry for everything. I know, I said, because I did. Call him today. Tomorrow has a way of becoming never when you're scared. She nodded and left, walking carefully on legs that betrayed her denial with every step. That evening, Amy found me on my couch, emotionally drained from the unexpected encounter. Mom told me she saw you, Amy said. She actually sounded different. Scared, but different. She wants to start treatment. Finally admitted she needs help. Do you think she'll follow through? Maybe. Fear of dying badly might finally outweigh fear of admitting illness. I pulled the blanket tighter. I gave her Dr. Harrison's information. The rest is up to her. You're more generous than I would be, Amy said. After everything she put you through, it's not generosity, it's practicality. She's sick, there's treatment available, and I'm not cruel enough to withhold information that could help. That's her technique, not mine. Amy hugged me tightly. You're a better person than our mother. Lower bar has never been set, I replied, making her laugh. 3 days later, Dr. Harrison's office called. My mother had scheduled an appointment requesting the same aggressive treatment protocol I was on. She'd also apparently brought her hidden medical records and a written timeline of symptoms going back years. She's committed, Dr. Harrison told me during my next appointment. Terrified but committed. I think seeing your improvement broke through the denial. or she finally got scared enough of her own symptoms to overcome her fear of admitting weakness. Either way, she's getting treatment. That's what matters. He studied me. How do you feel about her using the same infusion center? I can arrange different locations if you need boundaries. I considered this. Same center is fine. Maybe seeing it normalized will help her, but different days. I need my infusion time to be mine. He made notes. Very reasonable. I'll coordinate with the schedulers. That night, I wrote in my journal, Mom surfaced today drawn by desperation to the place where I heal from wounds she inflicted. Asked for help with hands that shook like mine once did. I gave it not from forgiveness, but from fundamental decency. She'll start treatment next week, 3 years late, but better than never. We're not reconciled, may never be. But we'll sit in the same chairs, accept the same IV medicines, fight the same genetic enemy. Parallel battles, if not shared ones. It's more than I expected and less than I might have wanted. For now, it's enough. The insurance battle continued for another month before Jennifer's prediction proved correct. The appeal succeeded, coverage approved retroactively. Morrison Marketing got reimbursed for their advances, and I got to keep my treatment without bankruptcy. You did it, Diana celebrated at support group. Fought the system and won. Had help, I corrected. Jennifer, Marcus, Dr. Harrison, all of you. Nobody fights these battles alone and wins. No, Diana agreed. But you fought when others might have given up. That matters. It did matter. Every infusion, every pill, every small victory over a body that had betrayed me, and a system designed to deny care. They all mattered. I was building a life not despite chronic illness, but incorporating it, adapting and thriving within new limitations. My mother started her treatments the following week. I wasn't there maintaining the boundary I'd set. But Amy went reporting back that Mom cried through the entire first infusion, not from pain, but from relief. She kept saying she could feel it working, Amy told me, like poison leaving her system. The nurse said that's not how it works, but Mom didn't care. Placebo effect is still in effect, I said. If believing helps her commit to treatment, let her believe. Do you think you'll ever forgive her? Really forgive, not just coexist? I thought about it seriously. Maybe. Someday. When the wounds scar over enough that touching them doesn't hurt. But forgiveness isn't required for moving forward. She's getting treatment. I'm getting treatment. We're both choosing life over denial. That's enough progress for now. And it was. Not perfect, not healed, but enough. My tremor-free hands wrote steadily in my journal that night. Insurance approved, treatment continues. Mom began her own battle today. We're not allies yet, maybe never will be. But we're no longer enemies, just two women fighting the same genetic lottery with different strategies. I chose truth early. She chose it late. Both choices led to the same chair, the same IV pole, the same hope that modern medicine can overcome inherited fate. That's either irony or grace. Maybe both. 3 months into her treatment, my mother experienced what Dr. Harrison called a dramatic response. The tremors that had defined her movements for years calmed to barely noticeable. Her balance stabilized. The cognitive fog she'd attributed to stress lifted, revealing the sharp intelligence that had been drowning in inflammation. I heard about it from Amy, maintaining my distance while Mom navigated her early recovery. But when she collapsed during her 4th infusion, not from the disease but from the weight of suppressed emotion, finally breaking free, I got the call. "She's asking for you," the infusion nurse said gently. "Having a panic attack keeps saying she needs to tell you something. You don't have to come, but..." I arrived 20 minutes later to find my mother curled in the recliner, sobbing with an abandon I'd never witnessed. Not even at Grandma Ruth's funeral had she allowed herself such complete emotional release. "Sherry." She gasped when she saw me. I remember her, really remember her. Not the sick version, but before. I pulled up a chair, maintaining physical distance while closing emotional space. "Tell me." "She was brilliant," Mom whispered. "Funny. She used to make up songs while cooking terrible rhymes that made us laugh. She could fix anything: cars, appliances, broken hearts. She was everything until she wasn't. The disease took that away, I said carefully. No. She sat up straighter, eyes red but clear. I took it away. I was so angry at her for getting sick, for becoming someone I didn't recognize. I turned her into the disease instead of remembering who she was beyond it. She looked at me directly, just like I did to you. Yes, I agreed simply. You did. I stole your support system when you needed it most, convinced everyone you were lying, seeking attention, being dramatic, the exact words they used about her. She laughed bitterly. I became the dismissive doctors, the cruel relatives, everyone who made her journey harder. I became what I hated. Why tell me this now? Because the treatment isn't just healing my body, it's clearing my mind, and with clarity comes... She gestured helplessly. Comes understanding of what I've done, who I've been, the damage I caused while running from my own damage. The IV pump beeped, marking another hour of medicine delivered. Around us, other patients read or slept through their treatments, each fighting private battles with public faces. I can't undo it, she continued. Can't take back the words, the betrayal, the months of torture while you suffered. Can't restore your faith in me as a mother. But I need you to know that I know. I see it all now, and the weight of it. Feels like drowning, I supplied. Like every cruel word is a stone in your chest, like the guilt might actually kill you before the disease does. Her eyes widened. Yes, exactly that. Good. Feel it. Drown in it for a while. Then maybe you'll understand a fraction of what you put me through. I stood to leave, then paused. But Mom, the fact that you can feel it, that the treatment cleared your mind enough to access empathy again, that matters. It's not enough, but it matters. I left her there processing the return of emotional capacity along with physical function. Dr. Harrison called me that evening. Your mother had a breakthrough today, he said carefully. The cognitive improvement has allowed her to access emotions she's been suppressing for years. It's actually quite common with MOG patients. The inflammation can affect emotional processing. Are you saying her cruelty was a symptom? I'm saying the disease may have impaired her ability to process fear and grief appropriately. Not an excuse, but possibly a contributing factor. He paused. She wants family therapy. With you, if you're willing. I'll think about it, I said, meaning it. That weekend, Jake called with his test results. Negative for MOG antibodies, as we'd hoped, but he'd discovered something else in his research. I've been digging into genetic markers, he said excitedly. There's new research about MOG disease patterns. It's not just about having the antibodies. There are protective factors, too. Lifestyle modifications that can prevent expression even in carriers. What kind of modifications? Diet, stress management, early intervention at first symptoms. Things Grandma's generation never knew about. I'm writing a paper on it for my genetics course using our family as a case study. He paused. With your permission, of course. Anonymous data only. Permission granted. Maybe something useful can come from our genetic lottery. He sent me his research that night. Pages of data about methylation patterns. Environmental triggers the complex dance between genetics and expression. But what struck me most was his conclusion. While genetic predisposition cannot be changed, family patterns of response to illness can be interrupted through education, early intervention, and conscious choice to break cycles of denial. I thought about that as I prepared for my next infusion. Cycles of denial broken by choice. 4 generations of women with the same disease, but I was the first to face it directly. The first to demand treatment instead of accepting decline. The first to refuse shame as a side effect. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. 6th infusion tomorrow. Would it be okay if we had the same day, not asking for conversation, just parallel presence? I stared at the message for a long time. Parallel presence. Not reconciliation, not forgiveness, just occupying the same space while fighting the same battle. It felt like a metaphor for what our relationship might become. "Okay," I typed back, "but I choose my chair first." "Fair," came the immediate response. Then after a pause, "Thank you." The next day, I arrived at the infusion center early, settling into my preferred corner spot with a book and noise-canceling headphones. She came in 20 minutes later, careful not to look directly at me while checking in. The nurse, wise to family dynamics, set her up across the room. We sat for 6 hours, two women connected by genetics and divided by choices receiving the same life-saving poison. I caught her watching me once, something like wonder on her face, as I typed steadily on my laptop, working despite the IV tether. Living proof that treatment worked, that life continued beyond diagnosis. Halfway through, she broke the implied agreement by approaching during my bathroom break. When I returned, a coffee cup sat on my side table, oat milk latte, my preferred order she'd apparently remembered. "Parallel presence doesn't include gifts," I said, but took the coffee. "I know, but caffeine helps with the infusion fatigue, and She shrugged helplessly. "I'm trying to learn how to be helpful without being invasive." "It's a start," I acknowledged. She returned to her chair, and we resumed our separate battles. But something had shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the foundation for it. Two women learning to exist in the same space without causing each other harm. Amy joined me for the last hour, pointedly sitting with her back to our mother. "This is weird," she muttered, "like divorced parents at a school play." If divorced parents shared an autoimmune disease and medical trauma, I agreed. But it's progress. Weird, uncomfortable progress. She looks better. Healthier. More like herself, I guess. Whatever that means anymore. I glanced across the room where our mother sat, reading, hands steady on her book. She did look better. The treatment was working its chemical magic, reducing inflammation, calming the immune storm. But more than that, she looked present. The brittle defensive shell had cracked, revealing someone I almost recognized from early childhood. Before Grandma got sick, before fear became armor. "Maybe that's what recovery looks like," I said. "Not going back to who we were, but finding who we are beyond the disease." "Very philosophical for someone hooked to an IV pole," Amy teased. "Infusions make me introspective. All this time to think about life while poison drips into my veins." We left before my mother finished maintaining boundaries, even in shared space, but I felt her watching as we walked past, a mixture of longing and respect in her gaze. She was learning the price of cruelty, paying it in lost relationships and careful distances. But she was also learning the value of persistence, showing up week after week to reclaim what disease and denial had stolen. That evening, Diana called to check in. "Heard you and your mom shared infusion space today. How was that?" "Complicated, but manageable. We're like parallel lines now, running in the same direction but never quite touching." "Sometimes that's the best geometry for difficult relationships," she said wisely. "Proximity without intersection." I liked that image. It felt sustainable in a way full reconciliation might not. We could exist in the same medical world, fight the same genetic enemy, without pretending the past hadn't happened. Parallel progress, each healing at our own pace. That night I wrote, "Mom and I breathed the same medicinal air today, our blood accepting the same chemical salvation. Strange to share space with someone who broke me, stranger still to see her broken by the same disease she denied in me. But we're both choosing treatment over tragedy now, both refusing to follow Grandma Ruth into the dark. That's not nothing. It might even be enough to build something new, not a bridge over the chasm between us, but maybe parallel paths along its edges. We'll never again be mother and daughter in the traditional sense, but we might become fellow travelers respectful of each other's journey. For now, that's enough." I closed the journal and prepared my evening medications, the daily cocktail that kept inflammation at bay. Across town, I knew my mother was doing the same. Two women, 4 generations of genetic inheritance, one shared battle against bodies that couldn't recognize self from threat. We were writing a new chapter in our family's medical history, one where denial gave way to treatment, where parallel presence replaced toxic togetherness, where survival meant more than maintaining illusions. It wasn't the happy ending anyone would choose, but it was real. In the end, reality was all we had. Spring arrived with unusual warmth that year, and with it came a version of myself I'd thought lost forever. 6 months of consistent treatment had worked its slow magic. The tremor that once defined my days appeared only during extreme stress. My balance held steady through long walks. Words came easily again, no longer trapped behind fog of neural inflammation. "Your blood work is remarkable," Dr. Harrison said during my quarterly review. "Antibody levels down 60%. No new lesions on the MRI. You're officially in remission." Remission. Not cured, that would never be possible, but controlled, managed, living with rather than dying from. How long will it last? With continued treatment, possibly years. Some patients maintain remission indefinitely with proper management. He smiled. "You've been incredibly responsive to the protocol. Your quality of life scores are approaching normal ranges." Normal. Another word I'd thought lost. Though normal now included monthly infusions, daily medications, and constant vigilance for symptom return, but also work without fear of collapse exercise, without exhaustion, thinking without fog. A new normal, hard-won, and precious. I'd returned to Morrison Marketing full-time with Jennifer's support and formal accommodations in place. My workspace included an ergonomic setup for bad days and work-from-home flexibility when needed. Marcus had become my unofficial guardian, watching for signs of overdoing it with brotherly protectiveness. "You're glowing," he told me one afternoon as I presented campaign strategies without a single tremor. "Like actually glowing. It's good to have you back." "Good to be back," I said, meaning it completely. But the real transformation went beyond physical recovery. Facing mortality at 28 had clarified priorities with brutal efficiency. I'd started a blog about invisible illness, sharing the journey from dismissed symptoms to confirmed diagnosis to ongoing treatment. The response overwhelmed me, hundreds of messages from people facing similar battles, grateful for honest discussion of medical gaslighting and family denial. "You're helping people," Diana said at support group, "giving them vocabulary for experiences they couldn't name." "I'm just telling the truth," I replied. Amazing how revolutionary that becomes when everyone's used to hiding. The blog led to speaking opportunities. First, a local hospital's grand rounds educating doctors about the patient experience of diagnostic delay. Then medical schools sharing how dismissive language had nearly cost my life. Each talk felt like retroactive advocacy, fighting for past me and current others facing disbelief. "I want to share something," I told the group one evening. My mom asked to read the blog, all of it, including the entries about her. Collective intake of breath around the circle. Everyone knew our complicated history. "What did you say?" Joan asked. I gave her the link, warned her it would be painful. She said she needed to see the damage through my eyes. "That's brave," Marcus commented, "of both of you." "Or stupid," I countered. "Guess we'll find out." 3 days later, she texted, "Read it all, cried through most. You're a beautiful writer, I'm a terrible mother. Both things are true." I stared at the message, not sure how to respond. Finally typed, "Yes, both true. Can we talk in-person, neutral location, your terms?" We met at a park near the river, spring flowers blooming in defiant cheerfulness, around benches meant for difficult conversations. She looked healthier than I'd seen her in years, the successful treatment, evident in steady hands and clear eyes. But also older, weighted by truths the blog had forced her to confront. The entry about Thanksgiving, she began without preamble, where you described the numbness spreading while I screamed about grandmother's crystal. I had no idea you were that scared. Would it have mattered if you'd known? She considered this honestly. Then probably not. I was too deep in my own fear to see yours. She paused. But it matters now. Knowing I prioritized a glass over my daughter's terrifying symptoms, that image haunts me. Good, I said, not cruelly but firmly. It should haunt you, just like your voice calling me attention-seeking haunts me during every symptom flare. I poisoned you against your own perceptions, made you doubt your body's distress signals. That's unforgivable. Maybe, I agreed. But I'm not interested in forgiveness discussions. I'm interested in whether you've learned anything. I've learned that denial is a luxury sick people can't afford, that fear of illness can become more destructive than illness itself, that I destroyed my relationship with my daughter rather than admit genetic vulnerability. She met my eyes. I've learned that you're stronger than I ever was. You faced what I ran from. I faced it because you gave me no choice. Support might have made me weaker, but abandonment forced strength. Is that what you believe, that my cruelty made you stronger? I thought about it. No, your cruelty made everything harder. I became strong despite you, not because of you. Don't rewrite this as tough love. It was just fear dressed up as parenting. She absorbed this correction without defense. You're right. I don't get to claim credit for your courage. That's yours alone. We sat quietly watching joggers pass and dogs chase frisbees. Normal people living normal lives, probably untouched by autoimmune civil wars or family betrayal over medical reality. I envied them briefly, then let it go. This was my normal now. I've started therapy, she offered, specifically for medical trauma and family dynamics. My therapist says I have complicated grief around my mother's death that I projected onto your illness. Sounds accurate. She also says repair might be possible, not erasure of the past, but building something new, if you're willing. She turned to face me fully. I know I have no right to ask, but would you consider family sessions not to reconcile necessarily, but to process, together but with professional guidance? I'd anticipated this request since Dr. Harrison mentioned it, had discussed it extensively with my own therapist, weighing risks and benefits. 3 conditions, I said finally. 1, we use my therapist who already knows the history. 2, you acknowledge the harm without minimizing or excusing. 3, we go slow, no expectations of happy endings. Agreed, all of it, whatever you need. I need very little from you anymore, I said honestly. That's the gift of abandonment. It teaches self-sufficiency, but I'm willing to try, for my own closure, if nothing else. We scheduled the first session for the following month. I left the park feeling lighter but wary hope tempered by hard experience. Recovery meant more than physical healing. Maybe it included recovering relationships too rebuilt on foundations of truth rather than denial. The blog, meanwhile, had taken on life beyond my story. Readers shared their own experiences, creating a community of the dismissed and disbelieved finding voice together. A publisher reached out, interested in expanding it into a book. I said yes, seeing opportunity to reach more people trapped between illness and invalidation. I want to include the genetic component, I told Amy over coffee. 4 generations of women with this disease, the pattern of denial passing down alongside antibodies. Will you include Mom's story, her hidden diagnosis? Only if she consents. Her medical privacy matters even if she didn't respect mine. Amy smiled. You're a better person than her still. Different person, I corrected. Made different choices. That's all any of us can do, choose differently than what came before. Writing the book became my evening project chapters, emerging between treatments and work. The story of navigating diagnosis while fighting family disbelief resonated widely. Medical professionals reached out acknowledging how often they dismissed symptoms they couldn't immediately explain. Patients shared tales of vindication after years of gaslighting. Families confronted their own patterns of denial. You're changing conversations, Dr. Harrison told me proudly. Making invisible illness visible. That's powerful advocacy. It's just truth-telling. I insisted, uncomfortable with praise. In a world that prefers comfortable lies, truth-telling is revolutionary. The first family therapy session arrived faster than expected. I sat in my therapist's familiar office watching my mother fidget in the chair across from us. Dr. Sarah, who'd guided me through the worst of the diagnostic journey, facilitated with gentle expertise. "Let's start with why you're both here," she suggested. "I'm here to understand the damage I caused and learn how not to repeat it," my mother said immediately, "and hopefully to begin repairing what I broke." "I'm here to process trauma in her presence," I said, "to speak truths that need witnessing. Repair feels premature." "Both valid goals," Dr. Sarah noted. "Patricia, are you prepared to hear difficult truths without defending?" "I'll try. I can't promise perfect responses, but I promise to try." What followed was the hardest conversation of my life. With professional guidance, I detailed the medical trauma, the gaslighting, the isolation of being disbelieved by those meant to protect me. I described the terror of losing body function while being called dramatic, the financial devastation of seeking help without support, the grief of losing my mother to her fear before disease could claim either of us. She listened without interrupting, tears streaming silently. When I finished, the silence stretched until Dr. Sarah gently prompted her response. "I hear you," she said simply. "All of it. The pain I caused, the support I withheld, the reality I denied. I hear you and I'm sorry. Not sorry enough, there isn't enough sorry for this, but sorry nonetheless." It was a start. Not healing, not yet, but acknowledgement. We scheduled monthly sessions, agreeing to slow progress over forced reconciliation. Each meeting peeled back layers of dysfunction, revealing patterns inherited and chosen. The work was exhausting but necessary, excavating damage to prevent its replication. Between sessions, life continued its forward motion. My book neared completion. Work thrived with my renewed capacity. The blog community grew into a nonprofit supporting those facing medical dismissal. I ran that half-marathon I dreamed of during my darkest days, crossing the finish line on legs that once refused to hold me. "Look at you," Marcus cheered as I caught my breath. "From conference room collapse to conquering 13 miles. From dying to living," I corrected, endorphins making me philosophical. Amazing what proper treatment enables. The race medal hanging around my neck felt like more than athletic achievement. It was proof of possibility, evidence that diagnosis didn't mean limitation. My body, properly supported, could still surprise me with strength. That night, I wrote the book's final chapter. Recovery isn't a destination, but a daily choice. I choose to take medications that keep inflammation at bay, choose monthly infusions that reset my haywire immune system, choose to believe my body's signals even when others don't, choose to build life around reality rather than denial. These choices, repeated endlessly, create recovery. Not cure, I'll never be cured, but recovery nonetheless. The genetic lottery gave me faulty wiring I can't exchange, but I can choose how to live with it. That choice makes all the difference. I sent the completed manuscript to my editor, then texted my mother, "Book is done. Chapter about family dynamics included with your permission. Thank you for agreeing to transparency." Her response came quickly, "Thank you for telling truth gently. Proud of you if I'm still allowed that emotion." I stared at the text, not sure how to respond. Finally typed, "You're allowed feelings. I'm allowed boundaries. Both can coexist." "Learning that," she replied, slowly but learning. And maybe that was enough. Not the mother-daughter relationship I'd dreamed of, but something real, built on acknowledged truth rather than maintained fiction. We were both learning, me to live fully with chronic illness, her to live honestly with chronic regret. Parallel journeys toward whatever healing looked like in the aftermath of so much damage. Spring bloomed fully as I revised book edits, attended infusions, worked and ran and lived. The woman who'd collapsed in Whole Foods, terrified and alone, felt like a ghost of another life. I carried her with me, would always carry her, but no longer let her define my limits. Recovery, I learned, wasn't erasure of the past, but integration of all parts, sick and well, abandoned and supported, bitter and hopeful. I was all of these, simultaneously creating wholeness from broken pieces. The cracks showed, would always show. But like those Japanese bowls repaired with gold, the cracks became part of the beauty. Evidence of survival, proof of persistence, maps to resilience earned through trials no one would choose, but many must endure. My story, our story, the story of 4 generations of women fighting the same genetic fate with different weapons, neared its next chapter. Not an ending chronic illness denied tidy endings, but a continuation. We persisted separately and sometimes together, writing new patterns over old. That persistence, more than any medicine, felt like the truest recovery of all. The call came on a Wednesday morning while I was preparing my monthly infusion supplies. An unknown number with a DC area code that I almost ignored, assuming telemarketing. But something made me answer. Ms. Peterson. This is Sandra Williams from the Patient Advocacy Coalition. We've been following your blog and the insurance discrimination you've documented. We'd like to discuss a potential class action lawsuit. I nearly dropped my medication organizer. A lawsuit against major insurance companies systematically denying coverage for MAGI antibody disease treatments. Your detailed documentation of the appeals process could be crucial. Would you be willing to meet? 2 weeks later, I sat in a conference room surrounded by lawyers, advocates, and other MOG patients who'd faced similar denials. The stories echoed mine initial coverage: sudden denial citing experimental treatment, appeals processes designed to exhaust patients already fighting for their lives. Insurance companies count on sick people giving up, Sandra explained. The appeals process is intentionally Byzantine. Many patients die or become permanently disabled while fighting for coverage. I almost did, admitted James, a fellow patient. Went without treatment for 8 months during appeals. Now I'm in a wheelchair permanently. Damage that could have been prevented. My stomach churned, thinking how close I'd come to his fate without Jennifer's intervention. What do you need from me? Everything. Your blog posts, medical records, correspondence with insurance, the timeline of denials and appeals. You've created a paper trail that proves deliberate discrimination. I thought of my coffee-stained journal, every symptom documented, every dismissal recorded. Evidence I'd gathered to prove my illness to family, now potentially helping strangers fight the same battle. I decided. What insurance companies did to me, to us, is criminal. If my documentation can help change that use at all. The lawsuit preparation consumed weeks. I organized files, provided depositions, connected lawyers with Dr. Harrison, who eagerly testified about medical necessity. Other patients shared their stories, creating a damning pattern of corporate cruelty disguised as cost management. "You're so brave," Amy said one evening as I sorted through another box of medical bills. "Not brave, angry. There's a difference." I held up a denial letter. They knew the treatment worked, knew denying it would cause permanent damage, did it anyway to save money. "Sounds familiar," she said quietly. Different scale, same denial of reality. She was right. Insurance companies operated like my mother had, refusing to acknowledge truth because admission cost too much. But while my mother paid in relationships, insurance companies paid in lives. The media caught wind of the lawsuit. Suddenly, my inbox flooded with interview requests. I accepted, selectively focusing on outlets that would highlight systemic discrimination rather than personal drama. Each interview meant reliving the worst moments, but also reaching more people trapped in insurance purgatory. "This is bigger than MOG disease," I told a CNN health reporter. "Insurance companies deny coverage for any condition they deem too rare or expensive. They're practicing medicine without licenses, overruling doctors who actually examine patients." The clip went viral. Within days, patients with various rare diseases reached out, sharing their own insurance nightmares. The class action expanded, becoming a broader challenge to denial practices. My mother watched from a distance, occasionally texting support. Our family therapy sessions had progressed to tentative coffee meetings, carefully negotiated interactions where we practiced being in each other's lives without causing harm. "I saw your interview," she said during one such meeting. "You spoke beautifully about the cruelty of denial." Learned from an expert. I replied not unkindly but pointed. She absorbed the hit. I suppose I deserve that, but Sherry, what you're doing, forcing accountability, demanding systemic change, it's important. I'm proud of you. Thank you, I said, meaning it. Her pride mattered less than it once might have, but acknowledgement still counted for something. Months passed in legal preparation. The case gained momentum as more evidence emerged. Internal insurance emails showed companies knew their denials would harm patients, but calculated lawsuit settlements would cost less than covering treatment. The callousness shocked even cynical lawyers. They discussed our deaths like acceptable losses, James said during a strategy meeting. Projected how many would die before successful appeals. 23%, Sandra confirmed grimly. Their internal documents estimated 23% of patients would die or become permanently disabled during the appeals process. They considered those acceptable numbers. The rage that fueled me burned hotter. 23% of people like me abandoned by systems meant to provide care. I channeled fury into preparation testimony, sharpening with each practice session. The insurance companies fought back naturally. They hired expert witnesses to claim MOG treatments were experimental despite years of successful use. They argued cost-benefit analyses justified denials. They painted patients as drug-seeking rather than health-seeking. Same playbook, Diana observed at support group. Whether it's family or corporations, the denial script remains consistent. We're attention-seeking, treatment-seeking, anything but legitimately sick people deserving care. But we had something insurance companies hadn't counted on: meticulous documentation and unbreakable solidarity. Patients who'd kept every denial letter recorded, every phone call documented, every symptom progression during forced treatment gaps. We'd learned to create paper trails from dealing with disbelieving families. Now those skills served larger purpose. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A whistleblower from inside one insurance company, moved by our testimonies, provided internal documents proving deliberate discrimination, emails explicitly discussing how to word denials to discourage appeals, training materials teaching representatives to exhaust sick callers, spreadsheets calculating profit margins from denying specific treatments. "This is it," Sandra told our group, barely containing excitement. "This proves intent. They knew they were causing harm and created systems to maximize it." The insurance companies settled rather than face trial with such damning evidence. The number made headlines: hundreds of millions allocated for denied treatments, permanent disability compensation, and systemic reform. But more importantly, the settlement mandated coverage policy changes. MOG antibody disease treatments would be covered automatically. Appeal processes streamlined, medical necessity determined by treating physicians, not corporate algorithms. "We won," James said at our victory, gathering tears streaming. "Too late for my legs, but others won't suffer the same fate." "You won this," Sandra corrected, gesturing at our group. "Your documentation, your persistence, your refusal to accept no when lives hung in balance. You changed the system. The money mattered. My portion would cover years of treatment, but systemic change mattered more. Future patients wouldn't face bankruptcy or permanent disability while fighting for basic care. The precedent would help those with other rare diseases challenge similar denials." "How do you feel?" Dr. Harrison asked at my next appointment. "You've accomplished something remarkable." Exhausted, relieved, still angry it was necessary. I watched my IV drip medicine flowing freely now without financial fear. But mostly grateful I could fight. So many can't. "You fought for them too. That's the power of collective action." The book released the week after the settlement announcement. Publishers fast-tracked production to capitalize on media attention, but I'd insisted on maintaining integrity over sensation. The story stood on its own: 4 generations of women fighting the same disease with evolving weapons, culminating in systemic change that would help thousands. Reviews poured in mostly positive. Medical journals praised the honest portrayal of diagnostic delays. Patient advocates celebrated the validation of medical gaslighting experiences. Some critics called it too angry, which made me laugh. Not angry enough, I told Amy. I edited out the worst parts. But the response that mattered most came from readers facing their own medical battles. Messages from people who recognized themselves in the pages, who felt seen and validated. Parents who stopped dismissing children's symptoms. Patients who found courage to challenge denials. Families examining their own toxic patterns around illness. "Your book saved my daughter," one mother wrote. "I was becoming your mother, dismissing her fatigue as teenage laziness. After reading your story, I took her seriously. She has lupus. We caught it early because of you." Those messages made everything worthwhile. The exposure, the legal battles, the emotional excavation of writing, all justified by reaching people trapped in cycles of denial. My mother read the book in one sitting, she told me later, cover to cover without stopping, like picking at a wound that wouldn't heal. "I see myself too clearly," she said at our next coffee meeting. "The villain of your story. It's accurate but devastating." "You're not the villain," I corrected. "The disease is. You're just someone who handled fear badly." Generously put. "I'm working on generosity. Therapy helps." She smiled sadly. "I'm glad one of us is healing." "You're healing too," I observed. "Physically, at least. The emotional work takes longer." "A lifetime, probably, but I'm trying." She pulled out a folded paper. "I wrote something, for other parents, about the cost of denial if you think it might help." I read her piece, raw, honest acknowledgement of how fear had corrupted love, how watching her mother die had twisted into punishing her daughter for living, how denial had stolen years that treatment could have saved. It was brutal self-examination without excuses. "This is powerful," I admitted. "Parents need to hear from someone who's been where they are. Would you consider including it in the paperback edition as an epilogue or appendix?" I thought about it. The book was my story, my truth, but including her perspective might reach parents teetering between support and dismissal. "I'll ask my editor. No promises, but I'll ask." The editor loved the idea. "Full circle," she said, "shows possibility for change even after damage, hopeful but honest." So the paperback included my mother's essay titled simply, "A Mother's Regret Choosing Fear Over Faith." It became one of the most discussed portions, parents confronting their own tendencies toward medical dismissal. Several support groups used it as discussion material for families navigating new diagnoses. The legal victory celebration happened at the infusion center, patients raising IV poles in toast. We'd changed precedent, forced accountability, protected future generations from corporate cruelty. The war wasn't over. Insurance companies would find new ways to deny care, but we'd won this battle decisively. To documentation, someone toasted. To persistence, another added. To refusing denial in all its forms, I contributed. We laughed this room full of people society preferred invisible, made visible through collective action. My phone buzzed with congratulations. Diana, Marcus, Jennifer, even Jake from medical school. The village that had supported my fight, celebrating victory that belonged to all of us. That night, I wrote in my journal one final time. Today we change the world, at least a small corner of it. Insurance companies can no longer deny AMOG treatment without consequence. Future patients will receive care without bankruptcy or legal battles. The system that nearly killed me has been forced to evolve. This is what justice looks like, not perfect, not complete, but real change built on documented truth and collective refusal to accept no as an answer. Grandma Ruth would be proud. I'm proud. We persisted, and persistence paid off. I closed the journal, this coffee-stained witness to my journey from collapse to courtroom victory. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, treatments to maintain relationships, to navigate life, to live fully within the boundaries of chronic illness. But tonight we'd won. That was enough. That was everything. 1 year later, I stood at the podium of the American Medical Association's annual conference, looking out at an audience of doctors, researchers, and healthcare administrators. My hands, steady now, tremor banished by consistent treatment, gripped the edges of the lectern as I prepared to speak about the patient journey from dismissal to diagnosis. 487 days. I began. That's how long I suffered between first symptoms and accurate diagnosis. 487 days of being called attention-seeking, dramatic, psychosomatic. Days when my body rebelled while medical professionals suggested therapy instead of MRIs. The audience was attentive, some shifting uncomfortably. Good. Discomfort meant impact. I'm not here to blame individual doctors, I continued. I'm here to examine systemic failures that turn patients into adversaries instead of partners, to discuss how medical education trains providers to dismiss what they can't immediately diagnose, particularly in young women. I clicked through slides showing statistics Amy had helped me compile. Diagnostic delays by gender, by age, by race. The stark numbers that proved my experience wasn't unique, but part of a pattern as persistent as the diseases being dismissed. MOG antibody disease affects thousands, yet the average diagnosis time is 3 years. 3 years of preventable damage while patients fight for belief. Today I want to talk about changing that narrative. The presentation flowed smoothly, mixing personal anecdotes with hard data. I showed brain scans, my own lesions serving as visual evidence of dismissal's consequences, shared insurance denial letters that prioritize profit over lives, but also success stories, patients diagnosed quickly when providers listened, families who chose support over skepticism. The solution isn't complex, I concluded. Listen to patients. When symptoms persist, investigate thoroughly. When tests are inconclusive, don't default to psychological explanations. And please never tell a patient they're too young, too healthy-looking, or too articulate to be seriously ill. The applause surprised me with its enthusiasm. During the Q&A, young residents asked thoughtful questions about recognizing bias, improving patient communication, advocating within broken systems. Their eagerness to do better gave me hope. "Your presentation was powerful," said a woman who approached afterward. "I'm Dr. Ruth Morgan, neurologist at Cleveland Clinic. We're developing new diagnostic protocols for autoimmune conditions. Would you consider consulting? We need patient perspectives." I accepted her card, marveling at the reversal. Once dismissed by doctors, now invited to train them. The universe had a sense of irony. Outside the convention center, my family waited. Amy bounced with excitement. Jake checked his phone for reaction tweets, and my parents stood slightly apart, still navigating their place in my new life. "You were amazing," Amy gushed. "Did you see how some doctors were taking notes? You're changing minds." "Maybe. Hopefully." I hugged her tightly. "Thanks for the statistical analysis. The graphs really drove points home." Jake showed me his phone. "You're trending on medical Twitter. #patient voices matter. Lots of doctors sharing your slides." My mother approached hesitantly. "That was extraordinary. Watching you command that room, educating the same types of professionals who once dismissed you." She swallowed hard. "I'm sorry I wasn't the advocate you deserved." "I know," I said simply. We'd covered this ground in therapy, but she seemed to need regular confession. "You're here now. That matters." We went to dinner, a carefully orchestrated family meal where everyone maintained boundaries while attempting connection. My father raised a toast to advocacy, Jake shared residency stories, Amy discussed her new position, teaching special education with deep understanding of invisible disabilities. My mother listened more than she spoke, processing her place in this reconfigured family dynamic. "I've been thinking," she said over dessert, "about establishing a foundation for families dealing with new diagnoses of genetic conditions, supporting research but also therapy education, breaking denial cycles." "With whose money?" my father asked practically. "Mine. The settlement from my own insurance case plus what mother left me." She looked at me. I've been holding on to it, but maybe it's time to let Ruth's money help others avoid her fate. The Ruth Peterson Foundation for Genetic Neurological Disorders, Amy suggested, has a nice ring. I'd want you involved, my mother said to me, if you're willing. Your expertise, your connections in the patient community. I'll think about it, I promised. Foundation work with my mother felt complicated, but using grandmother's legacy to prevent others' suffering held appeal. Later, walking back to my hotel alone, I reflected on the strange circles life drew. A year ago, I'd been fighting insurance companies in courtrooms. Now I educated doctors at conferences. My mother had evolved from chief antagonist to tentative ally. The blog had become a book, had become a movement. None of it erased the trauma, but all of it transformed it into something useful. My phone buzzed with a message from Diana. Saw clips of your presentation. You're teaching them to see us, so proud. In my hotel room, I sat at the desk and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on a blank page, the first chapter of my second book, focusing on systemic change in healthcare. But first, I pulled out my old journal. Coffee stains faded but still visible. I flipped through pages of documented symptoms, family cruelty, small victories. The woman who'd written those entries felt both intimately familiar and impossibly distant. She'd been so afraid, so alone, so desperate for validation. I wished I could tell her what lay ahead, not just survival, but transformation, not just treatment, but triumph. Instead, I began typing, "Dear newly diagnosed, I see you. Sitting in that doctor's office, relief and terror warring in your chest. You finally have a name for the rebellion in your body, but naming doesn't equal understanding. You're wondering what comes next, how bad it will get, whether the people who dismissed you will finally believe. Let me tell you what I wish someone had told me." The letter flowed advice from the other side of diagnosis, practical tips about treatment, insurance, navigation, family dynamics, but also deeper truths about identity reconstruction, grief for the healthy self finding purpose in chronic illness. I'd post it on the blog tomorrow, another lifeline for someone drowning in new reality. A knock interrupted. Amy, still energized from the day. "Can't sleep," she admitted. "Keep thinking about your speech, about everything our family's been through, how you turned pain into purpose." "Still turning," I corrected. "It's ongoing work." She sat on the bed, drawing her knees up. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Mom had believed you from the start, if she'd been supportive?" "Sometimes. But that's like wondering, what if I'd never gotten sick? Pointless speculation about impossible alternatives." I closed the laptop. We have the reality we have. The work is making something meaningful from it. Very philosophical. Chronic illness makes philosophers of us all. Too much time in infusion chairs leads to deep thoughts. We talked until late sister bond strengthened by trials that could have divided us. She'd stood by me when parents couldn't becoming family in ways that transcended assigned roles. That loyalty meant everything during the dark months of diagnostic limbo. The next morning brought another speaking engagement, this time with medical students. Younger, more eager, less entrenched in systemic biases. They asked questions that gave me hope. How do we center patient experiences? What language causes harm? How do we recognize our own dismissive tendencies? Start by believing, I told them. When a patient says something's wrong, believe them. Investigation can determine causes, but dismissal should never be the starting point. One student raised her hand. But what about when patients are wrong? When anxiety really is causing physical symptoms? Then treat the anxiety with the same seriousness you'd treat any condition causing physical distress. Psychosomatic doesn't mean fake, it means real suffering demanding real treatment. The distinction matters less than the response. They absorbed this scribbling notes. Future doctors who might remember this conversation when faced with confusing symptoms, who might investigate rather than dismiss, who might save someone 487 days of unnecessary suffering. After the talk, I met Dr. Harrison for lunch. He'd flown in for the conference, proud of his patient-turned-advocate. "You've come so far," he marveled, From that terrified woman in my office to keynote speaker changing medical education. Still the same woman, I corrected, just with better medication and a platform. No, he disagreed gently. You've transformed, not just survived, but alchemized trauma into purpose. That's rare. Is Mom coming to your panel? I asked, deflecting from praise that still felt uncomfortable. She is. Wants to hear about new treatments, research advances. She's become quite passionate about staying current. He studied me. How do you feel about her involvement in the community? Complicated. Grateful she's getting treatment supporting others. Resentful it took my near destruction for her to engage. Hopeful that her story might prevent other parents' denial. It's all true simultaneously. Complexity is healthy, shows you're processing realistically rather than splitting into all good or all bad narratives. Thank you, therapy, I said dryly, making him laugh. That evening, the conference hosted a patient panel. 5 of us with various autoimmune conditions sharing our journeys for an audience of healthcare providers. I sat between James, still in his wheelchair but thriving professionally, and a young woman recently diagnosed with lupus. The worst part wasn't the symptoms, she said during her turn. It was people suggesting I was too young for real illness, as if disease checks ID before attacking. The audience laughed uncomfortably. Good. Discomfort preceded change. James talked about adaptation, how his wheelchair became freedom rather than limitation once he stopped morning walking. I discussed the ongoing nature of chronic illness, how recovery meant management rather than cure. Others shared insurance battles, family dynamics, the grief of lost possibilities and joy of unexpected ones. What gives you hope? The moderator asked in closing. Community. James answered immediately, finding others who understand without explanation. Medical advances, another panelist added, treatments improving constantly. The next generation, I said, gesturing at young providers in the audience, doctors learning to see patients as partners rather than puzzles, systems slowly becoming more humane. During the reception afterward, I found myself in conversation with Dr. Ruth Morgan about the Cleveland Clinic position, patient advisor helping design diagnostic protocols and family support systems, teaching from lived experience rather than textbooks. Think about it, she urged. Your perspective could shape how we approach autoimmune diagnoses for years to come. I promised to consider it. The opportunity felt enormous institutional change from within, but also daunting. Cleveland meant leaving my support system, starting over in a new city. Though maybe starting over wasn't wrong when you'd outgrown your current container. My mother appeared at my elbow as Dr. Morgan walked away. Important conversation. Job offer, advisory position at Cleveland Clinic. Her face cycled through emotions. That's wonderful. Far, but wonderful. You'd be brilliant at it. Still processing, it's a big change. You're good at those. Big changes, I mean. Transforming difficulty into opportunity. She paused. I'm trying to learn that skill. Mom, I started, then stopped. What was there to say? Our relationship existed in permanent liminality, not close but not severed healing, but scarred possible, but limited. I know, she said quietly. We are what we are, but I'm grateful for what we are over what we were. I nodded. It was enough truth for a conference reception. The week ended with a gala celebrating patient advocates. I wore a dress that showed my steady hands, my stable gait, my thriving despite everything. The woman in the mirror looked confident, accomplished, alive. She bore little resemblance to the terrified patient who'd collapsed in Whole Foods, but she carried her inside like a reminder. You clean up nice, Amy said, appearing in her own formal wear, ready to accept your award. Still surreal, being celebrated for refusing to shut up about being sick. You did more than that. You changed systems, forced accountability, saved lives. She adjusted my necklace, unnecessarily sisterly fussing. Own your impact. The ballroom glittered with healthcare luminaries and patient advocates. I sat at a table with fellow honorees, all of us transformed by illness into accidental activists. We'd simply wanted treatment and ended up changing laws, protocols, cultural narratives. When they called my name, I walked steadily to the stage. No tremor, no weakness, just purposeful movement toward recognition I'd never sought, but apparently earned. The award was crystal heavy, and catching light like hope materialized. Sherry Peterson has transformed personal trauma into systemic change, the presenter read. Through documentation, advocacy, and unflinching honesty, she's improved diagnostic protocols, insurance practices, and medical education. Her work ensures future patients face fewer barriers to care. I accepted the award looking out at an audience that included my family, my doctors, my chosen community of chronic illness warriors. Diana wiped tears. Marcus whistled inappropriately. Dr. Harrison beamed paternal pride. Even my mother, complicated and imperfect, applauded with genuine enthusiasm. "This belongs to all of us," I said, simply. Every patient who documented symptoms despite dismissal, every family member who chose support over skepticism, every doctor who listened when training, said dismiss. We changed things together. This crystal reflects collective light. Later at the after-party, I found myself on a balcony overlooking the city. Jake joined me, newly minted MD after his name. "Proud of you, cousin," he said. "You've built something amazing from something awful." "Still building. The work's never done with chronic illness or systemic change. But you've created momentum. That matters." He paused. "I'm starting a residency in neurology, inspired by watching you fight. Want to be the doctor you needed but couldn't find initially." "You'll be brilliant," I said, meaning it. "Just remember, patients are experts in their own bodies. Partner with that expertise." "Learned that from you." We stood quietly, city lights below, like neural pathways firing. I thought about circles closing and opening, family patterns disrupted and rewritten. Jake would treat patients with genetic conditions like ours, armed with knowledge previous generations lacked. The cycle of dismissal stopped here with us with choice. "Cleveland," Amy asked, joining us. "You taking the job?" "Probably. Terrifying, but right. Like most important decisions." "We'll visit," she promised. "Often. Can't let you escape family that easily." "Wouldn't dream of it," I said, pulling them both close. The night wound down with promises to stay connected, continue fighting, never forget where we'd been, or stop pushing toward better. I carried my Crystal Award carefully, this physical reminder that surviving could become thriving with enough persistence and support. In my hotel room, I set the award on the nightstand and opened my laptop one final time. The blog waited, community eager for conference updates. But first, I wrote in my digital journal. Full circle, but spiraling upward. From patient to advocate to educator to advisor. The woman who collapsed in pasta sauce now teaches doctors to see beyond surfaces. The family that fractured slowly reassembles in new configuration. The body that betrayed me lives in negotiated peace medication, maintaining detente. This isn't the life I planned, but it's the life I've built from ruins. Tomorrow, I'll fly home, pack for Cleveland, begin another transformation. Tonight, I rest in the strange beauty of becoming through breaking, of finding purpose in pain, refused silence. I am my grandmother's genetic legacy, but not her tragic ending. That difference is everything. I closed the laptop and prepared for bed, steady hands removing jewelry-stable legs carrying me through nighttime routines. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, moving, building, teaching, living. But tonight I was simply grateful for treatment that worked, for communities that understood, for family that evolved, for voice that refused silence even when silence felt safer. The Crystal Award caught moonlight, fracturing it into rainbows. Beautiful broken light transformed by structure into something more than its parts, like me. Like all of us who'd turned suffering into change one documented day at a time. I turned off the light and lay in darkness, body quiet, mind finally still. Tomorrow would come with its demands. Tonight I rested in the knowledge that I'd not only survived, but transcended, not only healed, but helped others heal. The full circle wasn't an ending, but a completion that enabled new beginnings, and that more than any award or recognition felt like victory. The wedding took place 2 years later, on a perfect September afternoon in Cleveland's Botanical Gardens. I stood before the mirror in the bridal suite, hands steady as I applied lipstick, no tremor to betray the autoimmune storm that once raged within. My dress, carefully chosen, had sleeves that could hide IV bruises if needed, but today my arms were clear, my body cooperating for this celebration. "You look radiant," Amy said, adjusting my veil. She'd flown in 3 days early, helping with last-minute preparations. "Like actually glowing. How's that possible when you had infusion yesterday?" "Good timing with treatment cycle," I admitted. "And happiness, lots of happiness." Through the window, I could see guests gathering in the garden. Colleagues from Cleveland Clinic, fellow patient advocates, the chronic illness support group that had become chosen family. My blog readers had sent flowers from around the world, unable to attend, but wanting to celebrate this proof that life continued beyond diagnosis. "Mom's here," Amy said carefully. "Dad, too. They're sitting third row like you requested." Not front row family, but not banished either. We'd found our balance over these 2 years, holiday cards and birthday texts, occasional dinners when I visited, proud announcements of my professional achievements to their friends. She'd started treatment consistently, the tremor barely visible now, but our relationship remained carefully managed doses rather than full immersion. "That's fine," I said, meaning it. "Third row feels right." A knock at the door revealed Diana, my matron of honor, radiant in lavender. "Marcus is pacing like an expectant father out there. Says he can't give his speech if he's crying before the ceremony even starts. Tell him waterproof mascara exists for a reason." I laughed. 5 minutes, Diana warned. "Your neurologist is here, by the way. Said he wouldn't miss seeing his favorite patient prove chronic illness doesn't mean chronic isolation." Dr. Harrison had become more than my doctor over these years, mentor, colleague, friend. He'd written recommendation letters for the Cleveland position, consulted on difficult cases I advised on, celebrated every milestone of my continued remission. His presence felt like blessing from the medical professional who'd first believed me. "Ready?" Amy asked, holding out my bouquet. Purple roses for invisible illness awareness, white lilies for new beginnings, lavender for the calm I'd fought to achieve. "Ready." I confirmed, taking the flowers with hands that didn't shake. The music started, and I walked alone down the aisle, my choice needing no one to give me away, when I'd already given myself permission to thrive. Each step felt like victory over the days when walking required walls for support. The faces turning toward me blurred together, but certain ones stood out. Dr. Morgan beaming with professional pride, James rolling his wheelchair to get a better view. My parents sitting carefully apart, but both present. And at the altar, David. We'd met at a medical conference where he was presenting on adaptive technologies for chronic illness patients. He'd approached after my panel not to flirt, but to discuss collaboration possibilities. Coffee led to dinner, led to partnership in all senses. He understood spoon theory without explanation, never questioned infusion schedules, kept emergency medications in his pockets just in case. Love with chronic illness looked like radical acceptance and practical preparation. "You're stunning," he whispered when I reached him. "How are you feeling?" "Perfect," I said honestly. "Absolutely perfect." The ceremony blended traditional vows with our reality. Promises to love in sickness and health carried different weight when sickness was guaranteed. We pledged to honor each other's limitations, celebrate small victories, navigate insurance bureaucracies together. When he slipped the ring onto my finger, his hands were as steady as mine. Mutual strength, born from accepting what couldn't be changed while changing what we could. "I now pronounce you partners in all things," the officiant declared. "You may kiss and begin this new chapter." The reception afterwards felt like victory celebration for more than just marriage. The cake cutting required steady hands I now possessed. First dance moved on legs that supported me fully. Toasts honored not just our love, but the journey that led here. Marcus's speech destroyed mascara reserves. I watched Sherry collapse in a conference room, thought we might lose her. Instead, she rebuilt herself stronger, then rebuilt systems so others wouldn't suffer the same. David, you're marrying a warrior who looks like a princess. Treat her accordingly. Diana spoke of support group meetings where I'd insisted life existed beyond diagnosis. She proved it by living fully loving, fearlessly showing us that chronic illness might limit options but couldn't eliminate them. This wedding is promise kept to all of us still fighting. Dr. Harrison, reserved but emotional, talked about transformation. From terrified patient to trusted colleague, Sherry redefined possible. Her marriage today reminds us that diagnosis isn't destiny. Love finds a way. Life finds a way. We adapt and thrive. Even Jake, now a neurology resident, offered perspective. Sherry taught me that patients are partners, not puzzles, that family patterns can be broken, that choosing differently changes everything. David, welcome to a family that's learned to choose love over fear. When my father stood to speak, the room quieted. We'd agreed to no parental speeches, but apparently he'd needed to say something. I failed my daughter when she needed me most. He began, voice rough. Let fear and denial poison what should have been unconditional support. I can't undo that damage, but I can witness this joy and promise to do better. David, Sherry is precious beyond measure. She survived what would break most people and emerged luminous. Cherish that light. He sat down quickly, my mother touching his hand briefly. Her own speech remained unspoken, but her presence said enough. She'd sent a letter that morning, carefully worded acknowledgement of joy for my happiness and regret for our distance. I'd tucked it into my bouquet, carrying her words, if not her full presence, into this new chapter. The dancing lasted hours. Chronic illness community, proving that limitations didn't mean absence of celebration. We modified as needed chairs for those who couldn't stand long breaks for medication schedules, understanding when some left early to preserve energy, but joy persisted, adaptive and triumphant. No regrets? David asked during a slow song, holding me like spun gold. None. Only that we didn't meet sooner. Could have saved myself some terrible first dates. You weren't ready sooner, I said wisely. Neither was I. Had to become ourselves first. Philosophical bride, he teased. What's next, Dr. Peterson Mills? The hyphenated name felt right, honoring where I'd been while embracing where I was going. Tomorrow, sleep late. Next week, back to changing medical education. Long-term, maybe tiny humans who'll inherit my antibodies, but also my fighting spirit. Genetically complex tiny humans, he agreed, with excellent documentation skills and zero tolerance for medical gaslighting. Obviously. The night wound down slowly, guests reluctant to end celebration of possibility. I threw the bouquet to a crowd of chronic illness warriors, laughing as they debated whether catching it meant love or remission. Either felt worth celebrating. As we prepared to leave for our honeymoon, carefully planned around infusion schedule, I found my mother waiting by the exit. Just wanted to say, she began, then stopped, started again. You look happy, really truly happy. That's all I wanted to say. I am, I confirmed, despite everything, maybe because of everything, hard to say. The foundation work is going well, she offered. 30 families helped so far. Support groups, therapy coverage, medical navigation. Your grandmother would be proud. I know, I said, choosing generosity. Thank you for doing that work. Thank you for showing me it was necessary. She paused. I love you, Sherry. Imperfectly and insufficiently, but truly. I know that too, I said. It's enough. Not reconciliation, but recognition. We'd likely never have the mother-daughter relationship either of us might have wanted, but we'd built something functional from the ruins. That was its own accomplishment. David appeared with our getaway car liberally decorated by the wedding party with ribbons and just married signs. Also, chronically ill and chronically in love, courtesy of Diana's sense of humor. "Ready for phase 2, he asked. "Ready for everything," I said, meaning it completely. We drove away from the botanical gardens into Cleveland night city lights, like neurons firing with possibility. Behind us, the reception continued, community celebrating one of their own choosing joy. Ahead, honeymoon and home and building life together with full knowledge of what chronic meant and choice to love within those boundaries. My phone buzzed with messages, photos from the wedding, congratulations from blog readers, love from chosen family, but I silenced it, choosing presence over documentation for once. There'd be time to write about this, to process publicly, how chronic illness shaped, but didn't define my capacity for love. Tonight was for being, rather than analyzing. "Happy?" David asked at a stoplight. "Ecstatic," I corrected. "Also exhausted, also grateful, also about 12 other emotions I'll process in therapy next week." He laughed, knowing me well enough to expect emotional complexity. We'd built relationship on radical honesty about bodies that didn't always cooperate, futures that included medical uncertainty, love that accommodated limitation without being limited by it. Back at our apartment modified for accessibility we didn't need yet but might someday, I carefully hung up the wedding dress. No dramatic collapse this time, no tremoring hands struggling with buttons, no fear that happiness was temporary. Just peaceful transition from bride to wife ceremony to daily life extraordinary to sustainable ordinary. "Thank you," I told David as we prepared for bed, "for seeing all of me and choosing it anyway." "Thank you," he responded, "for trusting me with all of you, for building life that includes but isn't defined by illness, for proving that love stories exist beyond perfect health." We fell asleep, intertwined two bodies imperfect but complementary, building future neither of us could have imagined in our separate befores. Tomorrow would bring honeymoon adventures carefully planned around medical needs. Next month, back to work, changing systems so others could reach diagnosis faster. Next year, perhaps expanding family despite genetic complexity. But tonight we simply existed in the after of before-after diagnosis, after treatment, after rebuilding, after learning to love within limitations. The wedding was ending but beginning celebration, but also promise that life continued beyond what tried to stop it. In dreams, I danced with steady feet while Grandma Ruth watched her own tremor calmed by whatever comes after. She nodded approval at choices she couldn't make, treatments she couldn't access, life she couldn't live, but somehow passed down anyway. The genetic lottery gave complicated gifts, but I'd learned to play the hand dealt with grace earned through fire. Morning would come with its requirements, medication schedules, careful monitoring, chronic management of chronic condition. But it would also bring David's terrible coffee-shared laughter, building something beautiful, from bodies society called broken. That was the real miracle, not cure, but accommodation, not despite, but because. I'd started this journey terrified and alone on an apartment floor, legs refusing to hold me while family refused to believe me. Now I lay in bed, earned through battle beside partner, who understood in life built from ruins. The tremor might return, new symptoms might emerge, remission was gift, not guarantee. But I'd face whatever came with documentation skills, medical team, chosen family, and hard-won knowledge that survival could become thriving with enough support and stubborn refusal to accept no as final answer. "Still awake," David murmured, sensing my reflection. "Just thinking about circles and spirals and how far we've come. Good thoughts. The best thoughts, grateful thoughts, happy thoughts. Good. Sleep now. Tomorrow needs you rested." Tomorrow always needed something, but tonight had provided everything, love, community, celebration, proof that diagnosis didn't mean diminished life. Just different life adapted and authentic, chronicled and cherished. I closed my eyes and let sleep take me, body quiet, heart full, future, uncertain but unafraid. The beginning was ending, was beginning, and all of it was good.